Welcome to Creepy Vibes. Tonight's tale takes us deep into the eerie heart of Texas, where the shadows stretch long. The silence is rarely empty, and 20 true strange things seen outside Texas homes at night will leave you questioning every creak, every whisper, and every shape you thought was just the wind. From flickering porch lights that respond to unseen footsteps, to faces in the windows that don't belong to anyone inside, these disturbing real accounts will drag you into a world where the unknown peers back. And sometimes it smiles. But before we dive into the darkness, here's something strange. Most viewers make one huge mistake. They leave without subscribing. And by doing so, they miss out on the creepiest, spine-tingling tales that only the bravest dare to hear. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button now, because tonight's just the beginning, and the horror waiting beyond your porch light is far from overdone. So, where are you watching from? And what time is it there? Let me know in the comments, because the night is only getting started. Let's begin. The first night, she thought it was a stray cat. Maybe one of those long-legged, mangy toms that like to wander around the backyards in Bastrop County, Texas. They slink through the chain-link fences like shadows and vanish just as quick. But when the motion light clicked on at 3:30 a.m., sharp bright white flooding her yard like a prison spotlight, and nothing moved, Sarah Bennett stood by her bedroom window for a full 2 minutes, squinting through the glass before quietly telling herself it was probably just a raccoon or a possum. Maybe even the wind, though how wind could trip a sensor she didn't know. Still, she went back to bed. The second night, the same thing happened. Same time, same stillness. She checked her security cameras the next morning, just 2 blink cams. One above the garage, the other facing the backyard fence. Both showed the lights snapping on. Both showed an empty yard. Not even a flicker of movement. No wind. No animal. Nothing. Got by the third night, Sarah stopped making excuses. The light and old motion flood lamp screwed into the side of her detached garage had been installed years ago by her ex-husband. He wasn't much of a handyman, but it worked. It had always worked. It never came on randomly. Never flickered. Never stayed on unless something really moved. So when it blazed to life again, exactly at 3:30 a.m., and stayed on for almost 5 full minutes while Sarah watched from the window, holding her breath and clutching a worn-out throw pillow like a shield, she felt something cold and sour creep into her chest. It wasn't fear, not exactly. Not yet. It was more like recognition. Like something in her bones understood before her brain caught up. Something was off. Wrong in a way she didn't have the words for. She watched the grass glisten beneath the bulb, dew sparkling in the the heat of August. The garden hose sat coiled like a dead snake. The rocking chair by the garage door didn't move. And yet, the light held as if it were focused on something invisible. Watching back, she didn't sleep after that. Not really. The next night, she made coffee at 2:50 a.m. and sat in the dark kitchen with the lights off, one hand around the warm mug, the other curled against her chest. She waited. No music. No TV. Just her, the clock, and that buzzing silence. That presses against your ears when the world forgets to make noise. At 3:13 a.m., the motion light came on. And this time, it didn't go off. Not for 10 minutes. She sat frozen at the window, breath shallow, eyes wide. She could feel it now, that hum in the air. Like something was near. Like something had arrived. She didn't check the cameras the next day. She didn't need to. She knew what they'd show. Nothing. The kind of nothing that made your skin itch. The kind that meant something was wrong with the world, just enough to make it laugh behind your back. By the 5th night, Sarah had made up her mind. She set her alarm for 2:50 again, poured a glass of water instead of coffee this time, and slipped into her robe. She didn't look out the window. She didn't want to watch anymore. She just waited by the back door, barefoot on the tile, staring at the outline of the doorknob in the moonlight. When 3:13 came and the floodlight burst to life, she opened the door and stepped out into the yard. It was warm, still, and eerily quiet. No chirping crickets, no rustling branches, just the harsh glare of the motion light and her own breathing. She stood there for a full minute, eyes adjusting, expecting the cold, expecting the feeling to swell. But all she got was that heavy nothingness again, hanging over her shoulders, like a blanket soaked in fog. She took a few slow steps forward, crossing the cracked cement of the driveway toward the garage. Her robe fluttered behind her. Her bare feet slapped gently against the warm concrete. The light stayed on. She turned slowly, eyes scanning the fence line, the tool shed, the grass near the old oak tree. Still nothing. Still the chair. It was rocking. She hadn't noticed it at first, but the wooden rocking chair, the one that never moved, was swaying back and forth, gently, as if someone had just stood up. Her breath caught. The garage was 10 feet away. The chair maybe 5. She stared at it. No wind, no breeze, no movement but the creak of the chair. She stepped back, and the light went out. She froze in total blackness. The kind of darkness that doesn't just cover the world, but replaces it. She couldn't see the stars, couldn't see the porch, couldn't see her own hands. The only thing she could do was listen. And what she heard was breathing. Not hers, not from the house, not imagined. Heavy, wet breathing, close. She turned and ran. She didn't scream, she didn't think, she just ran. Tripped up the steps to the porch, slammed her shin, threw herself through the back door and locked it behind her. She stood in the kitchen, chest heaving, staring at the knob like it might turn any second, but it didn't. Nothing happened. No knocks, no footsteps, no sounds from outside. She didn't sleep at all after that. In the days that followed, she left the porch light on 24/7. She stopped going outside, stopped watching the cameras, stopped checking the clock at night. But the light still came on. 3:13 a.m. without fail. Her neighbor, old Mr. Howard from across the field, knocked on her door 3 days later. Said he saw something standing near the garage the night before. Asked if everything was okay. Said he didn't want to cause alarm, but whatever it was looked tall. Too tall, like it was bent over. Said he couldn't make out the face, but it was watching the house. Said it left when the light turned off. Sarah didn't answer him. Just nodded, shut the door, and sat in the hallway until the sun came up. A week later, the motion light stopped coming on. Just stopped, and that's when she knew it was inside. It started with Jamie spotting him first on a Monday evening just after sunset. She was rinsing out a bowl at the kitchen sink when she looked up through the window and froze. "Honey," she said, her voice flat and steady in that way that makes your skin tighten even before you know why. "There's a man standing at our mailbox." Brian had been upstairs, putting their daughter, Maggie, down for the night. He didn't hear her at first, but when he finally made it downstairs, Jamie was still by the sink, still staring, hands wet and forgotten. Brian walked over and looked where she was looking. Sure enough, there was someone standing at the edge of the gravel road, right next to their old black mailbox. He wasn't doing anything, just standing, still as a statue. No phone, no flashlight, not even moving his head, just ... there. Brian squinted. The man was tall, lean, wearing what looked like a brown jacket and jeans, hands at his sides. His face was in shadow. Street light didn't reach that far, and the dusk made everything out there look smeared in charcoal. "Do you recognize him?" Jamie asked. "No," Brian said. "Neighbor maybe? Not from around here." Her voice had an edge to it now. "Nobody walks these roads. Not like that. And definitely not after dark. Brian opened the front door and stepped out onto the porch. "Hey," he called. "You need something?" The man didn't respond, didn't move, didn't even twitch. Brian felt a strange tightness in his chest. The kind you get when your brain's telling you something's wrong, even if your eyes haven't caught up yet. He called again, louder. Nothing. "Maybe he's drunk," Jamie said behind him. "Maybe," Brian muttered. But the man didn't sway. He didn't breathe fog into the cooling air. He didn't do anything. Eventually, Brian turned on the porch light, walked down the steps, and took a few cautious steps toward the road. The gravel crunched under his boots, louder than usual in the silence. When he got within 20 feet of the mailbox, he stopped. The man was facing the mailbox directly. Not the house. Not Brian. He hadn't turned his head, hadn't acknowledged his presence. Up close, Brian could see the man's hair was black and slicked back unnaturally flat. His clothes looked too clean, pressed, like he hadn't moved in them at all. "You okay, buddy?" Brian asked again, but quieter now. The closeness made it feel more real, more dangerous somehow. Still nothing. A chill worked its way down Brian's spine. He backed off, slowly. Every step felt heavier than the last. He didn't turn his back on the man until he reached the porch again. Jamie hadn't moved. Her eyes were locked on the figure like she was afraid it might vanish if she blinked. That night, Brian called the sheriff's department, but the dispatcher said their only unit was on a call an hour away. "We'll swing by first thing in the morning," she said casually. "It's probably just some drifter. Happens." When Brian looked again around 10 p.m., the man was still there. At midnight, he checked again. Still there. At 3 a.m., he made one last trip to the window, and this time, the mailbox was empty. The man was gone. No footsteps. No car. Just empty gravel and a silent road stretching off into darkness. The next morning, Jamie insisted it must have been nothing. A prank maybe, or some guy waiting for a ride. She tried to sound convincing, but her hand trembled when she poured her coffee, and she kept glancing at the window like she expected to see him again. That Tuesday evening, around the same time as before, Jamie let out a sharp gasp. Brian ran into the kitchen, and his stomach dropped. He was back. Same clothes, same posture, same deathly stillness. Maggie, who was sitting at the table with her homework, asked, "Why's there a man standing at our mailbox again?" Her voice was calm, almost curious. Jamie told her to go upstairs. Brian didn't go outside this time. He just stood at the window with Jamie, the two of them watching, waiting. The man never moved. Not once. This time they stayed up together until nearly dawn, sipping coffee, watching the window. At 4:17 a.m., without warning, the man vanished again. Not walked away, not driven off, just gone. 1 minute there, the next not. That morning, Brian checked the mailbox. Nothing inside. Not even junk mail. He took a walk up and down the gravel road looking for signs. Footprints, tire tracks, something, but there was nothing. Like the night had swallowed every trace of him. On Wednesday, the air felt different. He came back at 8:14 p.m. on the dot. Maggie was the one who saw him first again. "There's that man again," she said. Voice smaller this time. Jamie turned white as a sheet. "That's it. We're leaving. But where?" Brian couldn't answer that. They were 30 minutes from the nearest town. No hotels around. Friends were hours away. And besides, some part of him needed to know. Who was this? Why was he standing there? They called the sheriff again, and this time, a deputy showed up around 10. Brian met him out front and pointed at the man. "He's been standing there for 3 nights now." The deputy, a young guy named Holloway, looked out toward The road chewed his lip and nodded. "Let me go have a word." Brian and Jamie watched from the porch. The deputy walked down the gravel, approached the man, and stood maybe 5 feet from him. He spoke, gestured, tried to get a response. Nothing. Then Holloway reached for his flashlight and waved it in front of the man's eyes. No blink. No flinch. The deputy looked back at the house and gave Brian a confused shrug. Then he stepped a little closer and gently touched the man's shoulder. Instantly, Holloway stumbled back like he'd been shocked. He clutched his hand, mouth open. Then he turned and jogged back to the house, face pale. "What the hell?" Brian started. "Cold," the deputy whispered. "He's not right. I've touched dead bodies before, but this felt like grabbing dry ice." "You think he's a corpse?" Jamie asked, eyes wide. "No," Holloway said. "He's breathing, barely. I saw his chest rise, but his skin no pulse. No reaction. It's like, I don't know. I'm gonna have to call this in." But when the deputy stepped off the porch and turned to radio in, both Brian and Jamie saw it happen at the same time. The man at the mailbox turned his head, slowly, deliberately. His face finally came into full view, and that's when Jamie screamed. His eyes were pitch black. Not just dark voids, like holes punched through reality. His face was too smooth. The skin pulled tight like plastic over a mannequin. His lips curled into the smallest, faintest smile, and then he turned back toward the mailbox. The next second, the radio on Holloway's belt emitted a harsh burst of static and then cut out entirely. By the time he got it working again, the man was gone. No one slept that night. They stayed in one room, lights on, shotgun loaded, and in Brian's lap. The sheriff himself came out the next morning, walked the property, filed a report, promised extra patrols. Nothing came of it. That night, the man didn't return, nor the next. For 2 weeks, the mailbox sat alone. Then, on a Monday morning, Maggie handed Jamie a sealed envelope she'd found inside it. There was no stamp, no return address. Just their last name in precise, slanted cursive, Whitley. Jamie opened. It. Inside was a single photo. Black and white. It showed the front porch of their house. From the road, Jamie, Brian, and Maggie were all visible through the living room window. The photo was taken at 2:17. None of them had been awake. The lights were off. Yet there they were, perfectly visible, lit by something unseen. Watched from the gravel road. Brian turned the photo over. And the same slanted handwriting was one sentence. "You looked better when you didn't see me." Late one July evening, when the air in Hopkins County hung thick with the scent of fertilizer and the distant rumble of thunder rolled low across the hills, a boy named Tyler sat on the back steps of his family's farmhouse, barefoot and bored, peeling paint chips off the railing. His mother was inside making sweet tea, and his father was out front wrestling with the belt on the old John Deere that hadn't started right in years. The cicadas were in full cry, louder than ever, humming like static behind his ears. Corn was tall now, shoulder high and green as emeralds, waving gently in the slight breeze that barely touched the sweat slicked on Tyler's neck. He was watching fireflies blink in and out near the edge of the field when something changed. At first it was a feeling, a prickling sensation along the skin of his arms and the back of his neck, like something had just brushed too close in a crowd. He stood up slow, the slats of the porch creaking beneath him, and narrowed his eyes toward the place where the field met the lawn, a wall of swaying stalks, thick and dark, rustling faintly in a way that didn't match the breeze. It was subtle, but different, like something was moving in there, not the wind. Not a deer. It was low to the ground. He squinted, stepping forward, just 2 steps off the porch. When he saw something emerged from the corn, not walking, not crawling. Dragging had moved in a lurching, wet sort of way. Not quite animal, not quite human. The light was fading fast and shadows had swallowed the far end of the lawn, but he could make out enough. A long body, too thin to be healthy, glistening under the rising moonlight like it had been soaking in something, water or maybe blood. Its limbs jerked like they weren't connected right, like a puppet handled by someone who didn't know what strings to pull. One arm, disjointed and pale, stretched out behind it as it dragged its chest and face across the ground. Closer and closer to the back porch. Tyler didn't move. He couldn't. His breath caught in his chest and stayed there, trapped behind his ribs like it was afraid to come out. His legs trembled. His mouth opened but made no sound. He just watched the thing reach the gravel where the corn ended, and the yard began and paused, or stopped because it had noticed him. It lifted its head. Not all the way, just slightly, and that was when he saw the eyes. No light in them. Just hollow, recessed sockets that should have been blind but weren't. He knew it saw him. Somehow, some way, it knew he was there, and it didn't stop. It dragged itself across the lawn. Every inch it covered was slow and scraping, like nails over pavement. Tyler wanted to scream. He wanted to run inside and slam the door and call for his mom, his dad, anyone. But the way it looked at him, or looked through him, made his legs lock and his thoughts tangle. All he could do was back up slowly until he was on the top step again, clutching the post with white-knuckled hands, praying the boards didn't groan too loud under him. It came within 10 feet before it paused again. There was a sound, low and gurgling, like wet leaves being crushed. Then a whisper. A voice, but wrong. It didn't come from a mouth. It didn't vibrate in the air. It slid into Tyler's ears like it was already inside him. Let me in. That's what it said. Let me. And Tyler turned and ran. He hit the screen door so hard it slammed against the wall and bounced back, nearly catching him in the heel. He barreled into the kitchen where his mom turned, startled, holding the pitcher of tea halfway to the table. What on God's earth? He grabbed her arm and tried to speak, but the words were mashed together with sobs. Something's. Coming out of the corn, it's on the porch. She didn't wait. She'd grown up out here too. When a child says something's coming from the field, you don't question first, you act. She rushed past him, but when she opened the door, the porch was empty. The yard was still. Only the chirping of crickets and the hum of night answered her. But Tyler knew. He knew it had come all the way up. And he saw the wet-smeared, dark and oily, stretching from the lawn to the bottom of the steps. Not blood, not water. Something in between. That night, Tyler didn't sleep. He lay on his bed with his eyes open wide, staring at the ceiling, listening to every creak of the house, every brush of wind against the window. His room overlooked the field, and though he closed the curtains tight, he could still feel the corn staring back. The next day, he refused to go outside. For a while, nothing happened. Days passed, then a week. The field remained still, the corn growing thicker and taller, the summer heat pressing down harder. His parents chalked it up to a dream, maybe a fever, too many scary books or late nights. Tyler stopped talking about it, but he never forgot, and then, in the middle of the second week, his dog disappeared. She was old, a retriever named Lucy, and had a habit of wandering out into the corn if left off the leash. She'd always come back before dusk. Always. That day she didn't. They called for her until nightfall. Tyler stood at the edge of the corn with a flashlight, heart hammering. He didn't want to go in, but he did. Just 5 feet, 10. The stalks closed in behind him like a green tunnel, the air suddenly still. There was no wind inside. No sound. And then he heard breathing. Slow, wet, shallow. He didn't see anything, just the glint of something pale and slick brushing against the soil ahead. That was enough. He ran back out, tripping over roots, scraping his hands. His flashlight hit the dirt and shattered. He didn't care. They never found Lucy. After that, strange things started happening. Footsteps in the gravel at night. Claw marks on the siding. The back door unlocked when they were sure it had been bolted. Tyler's mother began waking with bruises on her arms she couldn't explain. His father swore he saw something moving through the rows late one night when he went to check the irrigation lines. Something that ducked when the light hit it, then vanished into the corn without a sound. Whatever it was, it hadn't come. Just to visit. It had come through. The house began to smell, faint at first, like wet earth or moldy leaves, but it grew stronger, like something was rotting beneath the floorboards. They had pest control out. Nothing. A plumber. Nothing. A preacher. He didn't even stay the night. Just walked in, stood still in the living room for 5 minutes, then turned pale and left. Without saying a word. By August, the corn stood taller than the house. Every window on the backside faced a wall of green. No sun came through anymore, just a dim, sickly light that turned everything inside a shade too dark. Tyler stopped going near the back door entirely. Something scratched at it nightly now. Tap, tap, then drag. Let me in. That whisper never changed. Always the same voice. Always right behind the door. His father nailed it shut. That was a mistake. One night, they heard the roof groan. It wasn't a storm. No rain, no wind. Just a slow, steady weight pressing down from above, like something crawling across the shingles on its belly. The attic door creaked. A soft thud sounded in the upstairs hallway, then another. Then the whisper, closer this time. Let me in. Tyler's mom clutched him close on the couch. His father stood at the foot of the stairs with a shotgun, shaking. But when the sun rose, the house was still intact. That morning, the corn had moved, not flattened. Not trampled. Moved. There was a path now, a tunnel, carved straight from the back porch into the heart of the field, like something big had dragged itself back home. They left that day, packed what they could and drove west, didn't look back. The farm sat empty for months until the bank repossessed it. When the realtors came, they found the inside untouched, but something had broken through the boards on the back door. Something had left behind a trail, glistening and black, stretching from the floor to the corn that never died that winter. Not one stalk withered. Even in January, Tyler never went back. But sometimes, in his sleep, he still hears the corn rustle outside his window, even if there's none for miles. And sometimes, when the room goes quiet, he hears a voice that isn't his. Let me in. It started the week the heat finally broke. The kind of sticky, unbearable August air that clings to you all day had finally thinned out, and the evenings in Eastgate, Texas felt almost pleasant. The cicadas were still loud, the dust still hung low over the road, but for the first time in a while, you could leave a window open without feeling like you were being slow roasted in your own house. Jill Carson had just finished putting away the dinner dishes when she noticed the figure across the street. It was a girl, thin, pale, barefoot, standing on the front porch of the old Fletcher house. Jill's house sat directly across from the vacant two-story with its peeling gray paint and shutters that banged in the wind when the screws worked loose. The Fletchers had moved out in early May, packed up everything in a single U-Haul, and left without saying goodbye. Rumor was a divorce, but nobody knew for sure. Jill never did more than a wave and a polite howdy with them anyway. But the girl was there now, barefoot and still, wearing what looked like a long white nightgown. Not a costume kind of thing, but the kind of cotton nightdress little girls War in old movies or in those antique portraits where no one smiled. Jill squinted, stepping closer to the front window. The girl was maybe 8 or 9. She wasn't ringing the doorbell or knocking. She was just standing there, facing Jill's house, and waving. Not a frantic wave, just ... A slow, rhythmic one. Back and forth, like she was trying to get someone's attention. Jill's skin prickled. She pulled the curtain back just slightly, trying not to be obvious. There was no car in the Fletcher driveway, no porch light. The mailbox had been empty for weeks. And yet, here was this barefoot girl in a white nightgown, waving up at Jill's second-story bedroom window like she expected someone to wave back. Jill stepped away from the window. Her husband, Dave, was out of town contracting job up near Amarillo and wouldn't be back until Sunday. She considered calling the police, but what would she say? There's a girl across the street ... waving? Instead, she called out through the house. Hello? Anyone here? Even though she already knew the answer, she walked upstairs to her bedroom and looked out from the window the girl had been waving at, but the porch was empty. The girl was gone. Jill stared for a few more minutes, waiting for some kind of movement. But nothing happened. No footsteps. No car doors. Nothing. The next morning, she thought maybe she'd dreamed it. She was alone. The house was quiet, and she'd had 2 glasses of wine the night before. It wouldn't have been the first time. Her brain played tricks on her, but that night, around the same time, just after 8, she saw the girl again. Same place. Same NIGHTGOW. Same wave. This time, Jill didn't go upstairs. She just watched from the living room window, heart pounding. The girl didn't move, didn't knock on the door, just stood there, waving slowly toward the second-story window again. Jill opened her front door and stepped out onto the porch. Hey, she called, loud enough to carry across the street. You okay, sweetheart? You need help? The girl didn't answer. Didn't stop waving. Jill started down her steps. The neighborhood was dark, most houses shuttered for the night. Porch lights off, TV glow flickering in living rooms. As she crossed the street, she kept her eyes on the girl. But when she stepped onto the opposite curb, the girl was gone again. Jill ran up to the porch. Nothing, not even footprints. The paint on the deck boards was chipped and dry. No smudge where bare feet might have stood. She peeked through the front windows, but the inside of the house was hollow. Dust motes floating in the beam of her phone's flashlight. She didn't sleep much that night. The third night, she was ready. She sat at the window with the lights off, staring through the slats of the blinds. At exactly 8:17, the girl appeared again, still, silent, waving. Jill didn't move this time. She just watched. Her breath caught when she noticed something new. The girl wasn't looking directly at Jill's window. She was looking a little higher. At the attic. Jill's house didn't technically have an attic, at least not one that had ever been used. Just a crawl space above the second floor, accessible by one of those pull-down ladders in the hallway ceiling. She hadn't been up there in years. The girl waved, slowly, her face pale and unreadable. That night, Jill dreamed of footsteps above her head, light ones, scuttling like fingernails brushing across wood. In the dream, she opened the attic and something looked down at her, something with wet, white eyes. She woke with a scream that stuck in her throat and fumbled for the light. The bedroom was empty, silent, but she didn't go back to sleep. The next day, she called Dave and told him about the girl. He laughed at first, then told her it was probably some kid playing around, or maybe a squatter. They don't just vanish, Dave, she said. I'm not making this up. He promised he'd be home early, said he'd check the attic when he got back. That evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, Jill sat on the stairs, flashlight in hand, looking up at the hatch in the ceiling. She could feel the heat radiating off the wood. Something about it made her stomach churn. She didn't wait for Dave. She pulled the string, and the ladder creaked down. The smell hit her first like old water and mold. Then came the silence. Not the ordinary kind. A pressed-down quiet, like the house was holding its breath. She climbed the ladder slowly. Every step groaned. At the top, she pushed open the attic door and poked her head through. It was dark. Her flashlight flicked across insulation, wood beams, the faint shapes of forgotten boxes. Nothing strange. Then, in the far corner, something moved. She turned the light toward it. It was a little handprint, pressed into the dust, and another, leading toward the eaves. Jill's heart thumped in her ears. She crawled forward, flashlight shaking. There, behind an old crate, was a tiny indentation in the insulation. Like someone had been lying there. She heard a sound behind her, a soft creak. The ladder. She spun around, but no one was there. That night, she locked the attic door. Shoved a chair beneath it. She didn't sleep. The fourth night, the girl waved again. Only this time, Jill saw something new. There was a shape standing behind the girl. A taller shape, thin, gray, like a shadow cut out of fog. It didn't move. It just stood there, watching. And then the girl pointed. Not at the window this time, but at Jill, and the waving stopped. The next morning, Jill noticed something odd. Her bedroom window, the one facing the Fletcher house, had smudges on the outside, fingerprints, small like a child's. She lived on the second floor. That afternoon, she called a local pastor. Said her house might be wrong. He came with holy water, muttered some prayers, sprinkled the attic, and left her with a pamphlet that said God watches always. But God wasn't watching that night. Because at 8:17, the girl appeared again, closer. Now. Not on the Fletcher porch, but halfway across the street. Standing barefoot in the gravel. She didn't wave. She didn't move. Just stared. Jill closed all the blinds, turned on every light in the house, sat with a knife in her lap and the cordless phone in her hand. She dozed off sometime around midnight. Thump woke her. From the ceiling. Then another. Then something dragging. She climbed the stairs, flashlight shaking, and stood under the attic door. The string was swaying gently. She reached up and pulled. The ladder came down. There was something on the top step. A crumpled piece of fabric. She reached up and grabbed it. It was white. Soft. A child's NIGHTGOWN. She dropped it and slammed the hatch shut, locking it again. The next day, she booked a hotel and left a message for Dave. That night, she didn't look out the window, but as she closed the door behind her, she caught a glimpse of something in the hallway mirror. A girl in white standing at the attic door, waving. When they bought the house, it was a steal. 8 acres, 2 ponds, and a single-story farmhouse that sat square on a hill just off a back road called Rancher's End. It had a wide porch that wrapped around the front like a lazy arm, with peeling white columns and railings that had seen too many summers. The house had stood empty for almost 6 years before the Creightons moved in, and no one in town had much to say about it other than vague warnings. Those Texas kind of warnings, more shrug than sermon. Oh, that place? Sure is pretty land, but it's got a way about it. The clerk at the feed store had muttered without making eye contact, handing over a receipt for the barbed wire and chicken feed. Angela Creighton didn't care. She was a city girl who had fallen in love with the country and had the Pinterest board to prove it. Her husband Daniel had grown up in East Texas and was just glad to have a place far enough from Houston where he could breathe again. Their son, Mason, 12 and mostly quiet, didn't say much about the move. He kept his headphones in and his eyes down and rode in the back seat the entire drive from Sugar Land, Without a single complaint, Dot had started the third night. The wind had picked up after sundown, and the porch boards creaked in that old woodway like the bones of a house settling back into memory. Angela was sitting at the kitchen table, going over a grocery list when she heard it. A steady creak, pause, rhythmic, like a rocking chair. At first, she smiled. She liked the idea of some wind catching an old porch swing. Or something. It made the place feel lived in. But when she stepped out onto the porch, barefoot and curious, she saw nothing moving. No porch swing. No chair. Only the sound continued, soft but steady, from the far corner where the shadows thickened near the old flower boxes. She walked toward it, the boards moaning slightly beneath her feet, the wind brushing her hair back off her forehead. The sound stopped just before she reached the edge. She waited. Silence. She went back inside. The next night. It happened again, just after sunset. This time, Daniel heard it too. They both stood at the front window, watching the porch. There's nothing there, Daniel said, squinting. But you hear it? Yeah, he admitted. Sounds like a chair, Angela nodded. But we don't own a rocking chair, Daniel shrugged. Maybe it's something in the wood. Old houses make noise. Except it wasn't in the wood. It was on the wood. The sound was specific, like weight shifting back and forth. Creak, creak, creak. It came from a fixed point, not random like settling timber. Angela couldn't shake the feeling that it was a performance, like something was out there, rocking. For an audience. Just waiting. By the fifth night, Mason noticed. Why's there a chair outside? He asked, pointing through the blinds. Angela looked up from her laptop, confused. What chair? That one. Mason frowned. It's just rocking. She came over quickly, pulling the blinds back. There was no chair. It's gone, Mason muttered. It was just there. They let it go, mostly because they didn't know what else to do. The sound came every night like clockwork shortly after. The sun dipped below the pine trees. Never earlier, never missed. No matter how windy or still the night was. Creak, creak. Creak. Angela left her phone on the windowsill and recorded video one night. When she played it back, there was nothing, no sound, no movement, just grainy. Darkness and the hum of Texas crickets. But she heard it. They all did. A week later, Daniel decided to sit on the porch around sunset. He didn't say why. He just grabbed a beer and pulled a lawn chair over by the door, eyes squinting toward the dark corner of the porch. Angela watched him through the kitchen window, her stomach nodding. The chair wasn't creaking, not yet. But something about the way the shadows deepened near that corner, it felt wrong. She didn't know how else to put it. It didn't feel like a normal darkness, like nightfall or overcast dusk. It was heavier, like a shadow under a shadow. When Daniel came back an hour later, he was pale. You okay? She asked. He didn't answer right away. He set his beer down with a shaking hand. There is a chair, he said finally. I saw it. Only for a second. Angela's mouth went dry. What kind of chair? A rocking chair, old, slats missing. Wood looked burned. He looked up at her, and someone was in it. Angela blinked. What? A woman, or something shaped like a woman. Long white hair. Pale hands. I couldn't see the face. It was like it was looking straight down. You saw this with your own eyes? He nodded, and the second I moved, it was gone. They didn't sleep much that night. The creaking started again around 8:22 p.m. Right on time. Angela tried something new the next evening. She sprinkled baking flour along the porch near the corner. If something or someone was out there, it would leave tracks. She even smoothed the flour down with a broom so she'd know if it was disturbed. When they checked the next morning, the flour was untouched. No footprints. But there, In the smooth powder was the outline of a chair. Not just legs, the full bottom skids. Rocking back and forth, Angela nearly threw up. They talked about moving, selling the place, but Daniel said no one would believe them, and he didn't want to leave without understanding what it was. Mason grew quieter by the day. He stopped eating full meals. He stared out the windows more. 3 weeks after the first sound, Angela woke in the middle of the night to the creaking inside the house. She sat bolt upright, heart hammering. Creak, creak, creak. It was downstairs, in the living room. She shook Daniel awake, whispering, but when they crept down together, bat in hand, there was nothing. The room was cold, though. Colder than it should have been in July, and the smell was different, like scorched wood and wilted flowers. From then on, the sound moved. It wasn't just on the porch anymore. It was in the walls, in the hallway. In the attic, Mason began sleepwalking. They found him twice, barefoot and blank-faced, standing on the porch in the exact spot where the chair creaked. He didn't respond when they called his name, just stared forward, eyes glazed. Both times they had to drag him inside. And both times he screamed when he woke up, saying she told him stories. That she rocked and talked and waited for someone to come home. Angela started digging through county records. The house had changed owners 7 times in 50 years. Each sale was quiet, cheap, quick. She found an article from 1972 about a fire. A woman named Opal Cleary, widowed, lived alone in the farmhouse and was found dead after the back half of the house caught fire. The cause was never determined. One line stood out. Authorities believe Ms. Cleary had been sitting on the porch. When the fire began, remains were found near what appeared to be a melted rocking chair. Angela stared at the black and white photo of Opal, pale, long hair, blank eyes. The next night, the creaking didn't start at 8:22. It started at 7:45. Then 7 o'clock? Then earlier. It was moving up, getting closer. The house started to feel smaller, heavier, like something was crowding in. Mason wouldn't sleep in his room. Daniel stopped going to work. Angela kept seeing something in the hallway mirror behind her. Just a flicker. Just a shape. Then one night, it stopped. No creaking. No sound. Nothing. The silence was unbearable. They sat together on the couch, waiting. But nothing came. Angela fell asleep upright, the TV still glowing with static. She woke to Mason's voice, calling from the porch. "Mom," she said, "it's time." Angela ran to the door. Mason was in the rocking chair. It was there. As real as daylight, moldy wood, cracked arms, sit on the slats. Mason sat in the lap of something pale, something thin and horrible, and its long white hair flowed over his shoulder like a shroud. The chair rocked slowly. Creak, creak, creak. Angela screamed. Daniel rushed out, grabbed Mason, tore him from the chair. The thing vanished. They left the house that night. They never went back. The realtor put it back on the market 2 weeks later. Cheap, quiet, a steal. The porch still creaks. Right around 8:22. Then a little earlier. Then a little earlier still. Every night, just after sundown. Whether someone lives there or not, whether they believe or not, the chair rocks. Waiting. It had rained the night Duke disappeared. That kind of hard, sudden Texas rain that makes the ground feel like it's pulsing beneath your boots and drowns the sound of everything else under its roar. We didn't notice right away. Figured he was holed up under the porch or curled beneath the shed like he sometimes did during a storm. But by morning, he was gone. The yard felt too quiet. Still damp, still steaming in that sour way East Texas earth does when the sun comes back up. But not right. Something in the air didn't sit well. Amanda noticed it first. The broken chain. She had gone out with a bowl of dry food and came back pale. "He's not there," she said, not frantic, just confused. The chain snapped. I remember the way she said it, like the words didn't make sense even as she spoke them. We'd had Duke for 6 years. A shepherd lab mix with a thick black coat and eyes like whiskey in sunlight. He wasn't small, and that chain had held up to worse things than a storm. He'd once yanked himself nearly off his feet lunging at a coyote near the fence, and that chain didn't give an inch. I followed her to the backyard, the screen door slamming behind us. The doghouse sat near the oak tree, same place it had always been, painted red with Duke's name burned into a plank above the archway. The earth around it was churned and dark, deep grooves in the wet mud like someone or something had been digging or thrashing. The chain lay there, snapped clean near the bolt that once screwed it into the house's frame. Not rusted through, not frayed, just broken, like it had been twisted until it gave. I squatted next to the doghouse. The entrance looked darker than it should have. I don't know how else to explain it. It wasn't just shadow from the sun angle. It was darker inside than darkness should allow, and it smelled wrong. Not rot, not feces. It smelled old, like basement wood and mold, the kind that clings behind walls and never quite goes away. "Duke?" I called, half hoping he'd come bounding from the tree line, covered in mud, tail wagging like he always did. I put my hand on the frame and leaned down to peek inside. Something moved. It wasn't much, just a shape that shivered in the dark and pulled back. But it was enough for me to jerk back so fast I scraped my elbow on the bark mulch. "What is it?" Amanda asked, crouching beside me. I didn't answer right away. My heart was thudding so hard it made my ribs ache. I think he's in there." But I knew I was lying the moment I said it. We sat out on the porch most of that day, calling his name, checking the woods, driving up and down the gravel back roads around the property. We asked 2 neighbors and even checked with the feed store in town in case someone had seen him. But Duke didn't show. That night I couldn't sleep, not really. I kept hearing this low whining. At first I thought it was just the wind in the tree limbs. Then I thought maybe it was some feral cat under the deck. But every time I stepped outside, the sound stopped. I stood by the sliding glass door around midnight, mug of cold coffee in hand, staring out into the dark. There was movement in the yard, small at first, like something shifting inside the doghouse. Then the door flap, a bit of plastic Amanda had hung up in the summer suede. Something nudged it, but nothing came out. I told myself not to be stupid. I grabbed the heavy-duty flashlight from under the sink and stepped into my boots barefoot. The grass was still slick, and something about the air made my skin feel damp, even though it wasn't raining. I shined the light on the doghouse. The beam didn't go far. The moment it hit the opening, the light just dimmed, like it was being swallowed. Not block swallowed. I crouched again and heard it this time. A wet, clicking sound like something dragging nails across damp wood. "Duke?" I whispered. I don't know why I whispered. There was a shuffle inside, a weight shifting. Then a voice. Not Duke, not Amanda, not anything I recognized. It said my name. Just once. Low, guttural, like someone trying to speak through thick water. Dropped the flashlight and ran. Didn't even realize until I hit the porch that I'd left the beam trained on the doghouse, and it was still on. Amanda was waiting just inside the door. "You heard it too, didn't you?" I nodded. The next day, I brought out a long-handled shovel and poked at the doghouse from 10 feet away. Nothing happened. I kicked it once. Nothing. Then I crouched again and looked inside. It was empty. Number. Sign of Duke. No scent. No movement, just dirt. Except it wasn't the dirt from our backyard. It was blacker, thicker, like the packed earth from a forest floor. I reached in and scooped some out. It crumbled between my fingers like ash. Amanda begged me not to burn it. She thought maybe Duke had come back. Maybe he was hiding and just scared. But I couldn't take it anymore. That night, I filled the doghouse with lighter fluid and tossed a match in. The whole thing went up fast. Flames spit high and hot. I stood there with a garden hose just in case it spread. The fire hissed and cracked and lit the trees around us orange and gold. But the smell. God, the smell. It wasn't wood. It wasn't fur. It was like something foul being forced into the world through smoke. Like the burning of something that never belonged here in the first place. Amanda covered her face and went inside. I stayed until there was nothing left but a mound of scorched earth and charred nails. We didn't rebuild the doghouse. We didn't replace the chain. A week later, Amanda left the window open one night because the AC was acting up again. Around 3 a.m., she woke me up, her hand clamped around my arm. "Listen," she said. At first, I didn't hear anything. Then I did. Whining. Not from the woods, not from under the porch. From right beneath the open window, I moved slowly, afraid to even breathe. I peered through the blinds. Something was there, sitting, waiting. Its eyes glowed, but not like an animal's. Catching light. These were white, glossy, unblinking, no tail, no fur. Just the shape of something crouched low to the ground, like a dog might, but too still, too human in its posture. Its head tilted when it saw me. And then it smiled. That was the last night. We stayed in that house. We packed up the next morning and moved out to Amanda's sister's place in Jasper. Sold the house to a couple from San Antonio who liked the country charm of it. Didn't tell them about the doghouse. Sometimes I still hear Duke's tags jingling in dreams. Sometimes I wake up and smell the earth. That same moldy, wet scent, like something's trying to come back through. Something that used to wear my dog shape. Something that liked the warmth of the doghouse. Something that got in when the storm broke the sky open and the chain finally gave. The wind was still that night, thick with leftover heat from a Texas July day, and the only sounds were the ticking of the kitchen clock and the slow hum of the ceiling fan in the hallway. Lori was the first to notice it, lying in bed with her Kindle open but unread for the last 20 minutes, her eyes drifting between paragraphs without absorbing a single word. She thought she'd heard something outside a scrape, maybe. Or a soft thump. At first she blamed it on raccoons. Maybe. A stray dog. They got coyotes sometimes out by the fields behind the house. Especially this time of year when the creeks ran dry and the moon stayed high. She sat up and slid the thin cotton sheet from her legs. Josh, her husband, was snoring lightly beside her, one arm thrown over his chest, his mouth open just a little. She glanced at him, then toward the window. Their bedroom faced the backyard, and just beyond the hedges and back fence was a wide stretch of cow pasture. Beyond that, nothing but moonlight and dry grass. The window was closed, the screen intact. But there was a feeling, a tightness, like the air had gone thick inside the room. She rose and walked toward the window, barefoot on the creaky wood floors. As she got closer, she saw it. A hand, not moving, not banging or trying to open the window. Just pressed there, a pale hand. Adult-sized, splayed fingers, palm against the glass like it had been laid there gently, without any force or urgency. She stopped dead in her tracks. It didn't move. Her eyes darted beyond the pane, trying to find a face, a silhouette, anything attached to that hand, but there was nothing. Only the hand, flush against the glass, as if whoever it belonged to was pressed close to the house. She blinked once, then twice, and it was gone. She stood frozen for a full minute, trying to convince herself she'd imagined it. Her pulse beat hard in her ears, but everything else was quiet again. She finally reached out and turned on the porch light. It illuminated part of the yard, including the area just beneath the window. Nothing. No footprints in the dry grass. No movement at all. But when she leaned in, peering closer at the glass, the handprint was still there, clear as day. Slightly smeared. 5 distinct fingers, a palm, the faint swirl of fingerprints etched in greasy smudge. She didn't scream. She didn't wake Josh. She told herself it was a prank. A teenager. Maybe someone from town messing around. But their house sat 5 miles out from the main road with no neighbors for at least half a mile in either direction. The fence was locked, the gate shut. And who the hell sneaks around tapping windows in the middle of nowhere? She cleaned the glass, sprayed it with Windex, wiped it with a towel, and made sure it was spotless before going back to bed. Her heart didn't slow until nearly 3 a.m. when she finally fell asleep. The next night, just past midnight, it happened again. Josh was in the den watching reruns on the old TV. Lori was brushing her teeth when she caught a flash of motion in the mirror. She turned, toothpaste foaming in her mouth, and felt the same drop in her stomach. She walked slowly back to the bedroom, toothbrush still in hand. The light was off, but moonlight spilled across the floor. The window looked clean. For a second, she thought it was over. Maybe last night had been the end of it. Then she saw the smudge. Not new this time. It was the same one. The same handprint. Back in the same place. Exactly the same shape, size, and angle. But she'd cleaned it. She stood there. The toothbrush forgotten, her breath catching in her chest. Her hands shook. She backed out of the room and called for Josh. He didn't answer. She walked through the hallway, past the dark kitchen, and found the den empty. The TV was on, a commercial blaring, but no Josh. She called his name again, louder. From behind her, she heard the bedroom door creak shut. She spun around, heart racing, and ran back. Down the hall. The door was closed. She hadn't touched it. She grabbed the knob, turned it, and swung it open. Nothing. The room was empty, except for the bed and that window. Still locked, still closed. Still bearing the same oily handprint on the glass. Josh appeared 5 minutes later, climbing in from the back door with a beer in his hand. Said he'd gone out to the shed to look for a socket wrench. She stared at him, too shaken to speak. The third night, it rained. Not a heavy downpour, just a slow drizzle that slicked the grass and beaded the windows. Lori stayed up this time, curled on the couch with all the lights on, her eyes fixed on the clock and the back door in turns. Midnight passed. Nothing. The wind picked up. A branch scraped the roof. Then came a soft knock. Not on the front door. Not on the back door. But from the bedroom window again. She rose slowly, her heart thudding in her chest, and walked down the hallway. The sound came again. Not quite a knock. This time, a thump, a thud, a kind of slow, dragging pressure. Like something heavy being pressed against the house. She opened the bedroom door. The light from the hallway cast a long glow across the room. Outside the window, something moved. She stepped closer. The hand was back. But this time, there were 2, both pressed against the glass. One above the other. Palms spread, still, unmoving. No face. No breath fogging the window. Just hands waiting. She screamed then, loud, woke Josh. He came running, blinking the sleep from his eyes, saw her pointing at the window. By the time he looked, the hands were gone. Only one print remained, smeared and dripping from the rain. He told her she was dreaming, that it had to be some kid messing around, that it didn't mean anything. But the next morning they found boot prints in the yard, deep prints, heavy, leading up to the window and nowhere else. Not from the gate, not from the fence. Just from the edge of the yard to the glass. That same week, the dog went missing. Then the lights in the hallway began flickering at midnight. Sometimes the kitchen clock would stop at 12:03 a.m. and then resume ticking a minute later. A tapping started behind the walls, slow, rhythmic. And always just after midnight. Lori stopped sleeping. She stayed in the living room at night with the lights on and a bat in her hands. Josh tried to make jokes about it, but she saw it in his eyes he was scared too. The fourth night, there were 3 handprints, different sizes, one small, like a child's. That was the night Josh finally believed her. He stood by the window, flashlight in hand, and swore he'd find whoever was doing it. He went outside, barefoot and furious, shining his light in every direction. She watched from inside, pressing her hand to the glass. He didn't see them, but she did. 3 shadows, standing just beyond the range of his flashlight, motionless, waiting, watching him. She screamed for him to come back inside, but when he turned, the flashlight flickered, sputtered, and went out. And then the window fogged from the inside. She backed away, shaking, and the fog began to swirl, a circle forming. In the condensation, a finger, writing, one word, stay. Josh got back inside and locked every door. They called the sheriff the next morning. He looked around, said there were no signs of forced entry, no evidence of anything. Told them it was probably vandals, maybe drug kids out from Lubbock messing around for fun. He offered to have a cruiser drive by that night. They agreed. That night, no cruiser came, but the handprints did. 5 of them now. 2 on the glass. 3 on the bedroom door. Inside. The smell came next. A wet, earthy rot. Like something dead buried shallow and leaking through the floorboards and the flies. They appeared one by one, clustering on the windows, drawn to something. Lori couldn't see by the end of the week. Josh stopped going outside. He said the light felt wrong, that the sun looked different. Too bright and too dim at the same time. Like it was flickering just behind a curtain. Lori tried to leave, packed a bag and drove down the road. But every time she turned on the ignition, her windshield fogged over, and every time she wiped it clear, that handprint returned. Same angle, same size. Always there. It wasn't just the window anymore. The mirrors started fogging. The shower door, the glass face of her alarm clock, even the TV screen, always around midnight, always with that same sickening sense of being watched. One night, she tried to cover the bedroom window with cardboard and duct tape. Josh didn't argue. He just sat on the bed and stared at the wall. The moment the last piece was up, the lights went out. Every bulb in the house. Darkness. And then the knocking started. Again. Not outside. From inside the walls. Closer. Closer. And when the cardboard peeled back by itself, silent and slow, the glass was covered. Dozens of hands now. Pressing, smearing, reaching. She screamed. And the room filled with static. Not sound. Static. Buzzing. Deafening. The lights returned for a second, and she saw Josh, mouth wide, eyes bleeding, as if he'd seen something that didn't belong in this world. Then he vanished. The police found her in the backyard, curled in a patch of dead grass, whispering about the window, about the hands, about the smudge that wouldn't clean. No matter how hard she scrubbed, they bulldozed the house a month later, said it was unsafe, said it was rotting from the foundation. But on the last day, as the machines rolled in and the last wall came down, one of the workers found something, a pane of glass still intact, and on it 5 HNDPRINTS. Fresh, warm, still smudging slowly, as if someone had just pulled away. The night it started, the three Graves kids were camping in a patch of tall grass behind the old family home in Possum Walk, Texas. Not a real town so much as a cluster of houses scattered down a cracked two-lane road between Lufkin and nowhere. It was late July, thick with heat, and the kind of quiet that made your ears ring after sundown. Their father had died the winter before, and their mother, Elaine, had been trying to hold it together, raising three kids while juggling night shifts at the hospital and bills that didn't seem to stop piling. So when she agreed to let the kids pitch their tent out back for the weekend, it felt like a little freedom for them and maybe a little space for her too. Ben, the oldest at 12, was in charge. Not that he liked the title, but it stuck to him anyway. Sarah was 10 and full of questions that rarely ended in question marks. She loved bugs and knew things about snakes that made her classmates inch away. Tyler was the youngest at 7, quiet and small and prone to sleepwalking. He still dragged a sun-bleached bear around by the arm and refused to sleep without it. They set up the faded blue tent under the lone pecan tree and filled it with flashlights, a cooler of Capri Suns, and too many snacks. Around 9, Mom brought out a blanket and told them goodnight, brushing each of their foreheads with a kiss and giving Ben a quick wink that meant, "Keep your brother out of the damn road." The woods behind their yard weren't deep, maybe 20 or 30 yards thick, but they were old. Thorn vines crawled the low branches, and you couldn't go 5 feet without stepping in a nest of dewberry or rustling the nests of cicadas. The locals called it Whispering Wood. Their dad used to joke about it. "Whispers don't always need mouths," he'd said once, cleaning a squirrel on the porch the first time they heard the voice. It was just past 11:30. The air had cooled. The tent was dark, and they just finished telling each other a story about a raccoon that had learned how to open their fridge. Tyler had dozed off, curled like a comma in the sleeping bag. Ben was starting to drift when Sarah sat up straight, her eyes wide and alert. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Ben rubbed his face. "What?" I thought Mom called. "Me." Ben sat up too, frowning. The house was dark. No porch light. No sign of their mom at the window. He pulled back the tent flap, scanned the backyard. Nothing. Just crickets and wind brushing the top of the grass. Then, clear as day, a voice called from the tree line. "Sar-AH ... Come help me, sweetheart." The voice had the same soft drawl as their mother. Same way she stretched the syllables like warm taffy when she was tired. Sarah leaned forward, mouth open, trying to pinpoint it. "Mom?" She called back. Ben pulled her inside and zipped the flap shut. She wouldn't be out there. It's past midnight. But it was her. No, it just sounded like her. They lay still, eyes open now, staring at the faint orange glow of the battery lantern. 5 minutes passed. 10. The wind pushed against the side of the tent, made the thin nylon ripple like waves. Then it came again, quieter this time, and closer. Ben. "Honey, I need your help with something ... double quotes." He sat bolt upright. His heart thundered in his chest. That was her voice. But something was off. It was like listening to someone who had heard his mom speak and was now trying to mimic her from memory. Too smooth, too calm. Like when people do impressions that are almost right, but miss something important behind the eyes. Sarah whispered, "You hear it now?" Ben nodded slowly. "Stay in the tent." "I want to go see." "Stay in the tent." He grabbed the flashlight and unzipped the flap just enough to poke the beam through. The trees swayed. A low wind hissed through them. He saw nothing but leaves and trunks and shadows that didn't seem to want to settle. The light caught a glint of something behind the brush. Wet, like an eye. Then gone. Back inside, Tyler stirred. He sat up, rubbed his eyes, and in the dim light, they saw his lips move. "Mom's calling me," he said sleepily. Ben grabbed him by the shoulders. "No, she isn't. She's asleep." Tyler looked confused, like he was trying to remember the end of a dream. But she said she needed help. She was stuck. Said she was cold. Sarah's face had gone pale. That's what she said to me. Ben turned off the lantern. Whatever it was, it seemed to want them outside. It wanted to lure them into the trees. He didn't know how he knew that. He just knew. They huddled in silence, barely breathing, until the voice came again, only this time. It didn't sound like their mother. It sounded like someone else. Pretending to be their mother, slower, hollow, like it was trying on her voice the way you'd try on an old coat that didn't quite fit. "Tyler, come outside, baby. I'm cold." The voice was closer, maybe 10 feet away. Ben clutched the flashlight and swept it over the flap, trying not to let his hand shake. He mouthed, "Don't move to the others." The sound of the zipper would be too loud, too easy to give them away. Then they heard something. Breathing, just beyond the tent, wet, gurgling, wrong. Like lungs filled with water. It walked the perimeter once, twice. They could hear it brushing against the tent wall. No footsteps. Just something dragging itself in a circle. Then it stopped, and whispered, "Please open the door." Ben turned the flashlight on and pointed it at the roof of the tent, not daring to unzip. The beam cast a weak glow across the fabric. He saw a shadow stretch long and thin across the side. A head, shoulders, but the shape was off. The proportions were wrong. The neck was too long. The arms hung too low. Sarah whimpered. Tyler was crying softly now, burying his face in the bear's matted fur. Ben wrapped an arm around them both. The shadow moved to the front flap. Something tapped on the zipper from outside. Not tugging, not forcing, just a gentle, steady tick-tick of a finger. Then, slowly, it began to say all their names. Not all at once, not shouted, just whispered, one after the other. Ben, Sarah, Tyler, over and over, like it was learning them. The last time, it said Tyler's name in a sing-song tone that made Sarah gag. They didn't sleep. When the sun finally rose, the voice had long gone quiet. Birds chirped. The heat returned. But they didn't dare unzip the tent until they heard their mother's real voice calling from the back porch. When they finally stepped out, they saw that the grass around the tent was pressed down in a perfect circle. The trees were still. The air was still. But there were footprints in the dirt. Not bare, not boots. Something in between. Long, flat, dragging in the middle. And all of them led back into the woods. Their mother didn't believe them. She said they'd been dreaming or scaring each other. She hugged them tight and promised they were safe now. But that night, she slept in a chair in their room and for the first time in years, locked the back door. A week later, she found Tyler standing, barefoot at the edge of the trees. He wasn't sleepwalking. He was listening, head tilted like a dog hearing something far away. When she asked him what he was doing, he said, "Mom needs help again. She got lost in the woods." Elaine pulled him back hard. He screamed like she'd burned him. That night, she nailed every window shut. They never camped in the yard again. The tent stayed folded in the garage until they moved away the next spring. And even then, sometimes, when they left a window cracked too wide, the siblings said they could hear something in the woods behind the house, whispering just under the sound of the wind, practicing, mimicking. Calling their names. It started on a Monday evening, one of those muggy Texas twilights where the cicadas never shut up and the air smells like wet concrete and yard clippings. Levi had just come back from work. He managed accounts for a car dealership in Paris, Texas. Nothing special, just numbers and spreadsheets and the occasional headache from salesmen trying to fudge their commissions. He pulled into the driveway of the modest single-story brick house on Buckley Street. the one he and his wife had moved into a year ago, back when everything still felt new and exciting. The yard was dry, despite the sprinkler system, and the mailbox leaned a little forward like it was tired of standing upright. He barely noticed it anymore. That night, as the sun dipped behind the line of oaks across the street, Levi stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing a mug. His wife, Denise, was folding laundry on the couch in her usual way, knees up, half the clothes draped over her legs. She was humming something tuneless, maybe just out of boredom. He glanced up through the narrow kitchen window above the sink. And that's when he saw a dot. At first, he thought it was a reflection. The glass was smeared with faint traces of soap residue and fingerprints, and with the porch light behind him casting shadows, it could have easily been a trick of the eye. But when he leaned in closer, squinting past the glare, he saw it again. A man, across the street, standing motionless by the hedge that separated the Morgan house from the Sullivans. He didn't move. He didn't wave. He just stood there. Levi didn't recognize him at first. The distance was enough to keep the features blurry, especially in the dying light. But there was something familiar about the posture, the tilt of the head, the way the arms hung stiffly at his sides. He called Denise over without taking his eyes off the window. She came, laundry still clutched to her chest, and leaned in beside him. "Do you see that?" he asked quietly. She looked. Her breath caught. Is that you?" Levi's mouth went dry. "What?" She stepped back, her brows furrowed. "It looks like you. From the back, sort of." But she paused, then added something that made his skin prickle. "Taller." He turned off the tap and walked out onto the porch. Denise followed, barefoot, still holding a balled-up t-shirt in one hand. The figure was still there. And now, up close and without the glare of the kitchen window, Levi could see more clearly. The man was wearing clothes just like his blue jeans, a light gray polo, boots with that same scuffed toe. But everything about him seemed stretched. His limbs were too long, his torso just a few inches too narrow, like someone had taken Levi's body and pulled it on a rack. And the face, Levi stared hard, trying to make it out. There wasn't much light on that side of the street, but he thought he could see the shape of the eyes, the jaw, even the scar above the eyebrow. Something. He'd gotten back in high school when he tripped on a sidewalk crack and slammed into a fire hydrant. Denise gripped his arm suddenly. It smiled. "What?" "I swear to God, Levi," it smiled. At me. It didn't blink, didn't wave, it just smiled. He looked again. The figure was still staring, still motionless. Then, just as a breeze picked up, rustling the oak branches above, the figure turned and walked into the shadows behind the Sullivans' house. Levi and Denise didn't say anything for a while. They just stood there until the sky turned completely dark and the crickets replaced the cicadas. Eventually, Levi mumbled something about maybe it being a prank or a coincidence, and they went back inside. Denise didn't sleep well that night. Neither did Levi. The next day at work, Levi couldn't concentrate. He kept thinking about the figure, the too familiar shape of it, the oddness of the way it moved. And Denise had seen it too. That's what really unnerved him. If it were just him, he could have blamed exhaustion or some kind of hallucination, but they'd both seen it. And she said it smiled. That evening, he got home a little later than usual, partly on purpose. He took a few laps around the block before pulling into the driveway. Everything looked normal. The neighborhood was calm. Kids playing in a yard a few houses down, someone grilling out back, the soft drone of a lawnmower in the distance. But as soon as he stepped inside, he saw the look on Denise's face. "He was back," she said. Her voice was tight, her hands trembling slightly. "Where?" "Same place, just standing there. But this time, he was closer." Levi swallowed. "Did he do anything?" She nodded slowly. He lifted his hand. Just one, like he was saying, "Hi," but it wasn't right. He held it up too long. And his fingers, she shook her head. "They're too long, Levi, like they don't fit." He went out immediately. The street was empty. The Sullivan yard quiet. No one at the Morgans. He even walked across the street just to prove something to himself. Nothing. No footprints. No signs of anyone standing there. That night, they left the porch light on. And Levi sat in the living room with a baseball bat across his lap, feeling like a fool but unable to shake the crawling feeling on the back of his neck. Denise kept checking the windows every 20 minutes. Around midnight, she gasped and yanked back the curtain in the hallway. He was there again. This time, he was standing in the middle of their front yard, and this time, Levi could see his face. It was his. Every detail. The scar, the faint stubble, the little bump on the nose from when he broke it as a teenager, but again, stretched, pulled thin, like someone had melted wax and let it harden again in the wrong proportions. His eyes were wrong, too round, too wide. And they didn't blink. Levi stepped outside, bat in hand, his pulse thudding in his ears. "Hey!" he shouted. The thing didn't respond. "Who are you?" Still no answer. But it did something else. It tilted its head, slowly, like a curious dog. Then it began to walk, not away, not toward him, but sideways. Step by step, like someone dragging a mannequin on strings. It moved past the hedges and disappeared into the dark between the two houses next door. The next few days were hell. Denise begged him to call the police, but what would he say? "There's a guy who looks like me, except wrong, and he stands in our yard." They'd laugh him out of the station. He did install a camera over the porch, though, and floodlights. That night, the lights didn't flicker on, but the camera caught something. At 3:12 a.m., the floodlight blinked for a split second, and the footage showed a tall figure standing directly in front of the lens, just standing there, smiling. Levi couldn't go to work the next day. He stayed home, pacing, jumping at every creak of the floorboards. Denise was in the guest room. She said she didn't feel safe in their bedroom anymore. When she passed him in the hallway, she whispered, "It's not just him now." He grabbed her arms. "What do you mean?" "I saw it again. This morning. When I opened the blinds, there were two of them. One was taller than the other. He ran outside barefoot, still in his sweatpants. Scanned the yards. Nothing. No signs, no movement. He stayed up all night. Nothing came. The next morning, when he finally crashed on the couch, he dreamed of mirrors. Endless mirrors, each one showing a different version of him. Some smiling, some not, all staring. He woke to the sound of glass breaking, raced down the hallway to find the sliding door shattered. Denise gone. He called her name. Over and over. No answer. There were footprints in the grass leading out to the street. Then across, then toward the trees behind the Sullivan house. Levi followed them, heart thumping like a hammer in his chest. The trees were dark, dense. He pushed his way in. Heard something rustling, soft, whispering. He turned and froze. There were more of them now. 3, 4, 5, all shaped like him, all smiling. The tallest one stood in the middle, its neck craned down, looking at Levi like a spider eyeing a fly. And standing beside them, holding its hand, was Denise, smiling too. He screamed. The neighbors found the house empty the next day. Doors wide open. Camera feed corrupted. No trace of Livy. No trace of Denise. But sometimes around dusk, a man is seen standing on Buckley Street just watching the house. Sometimes two. Sometimes more. They look like Levi, but taller. Every town has its stories, the ones people tell in hushed tones over beers or late-night drives, stories that always start with, "I don't believe in that crap," but ours was about the streetlight on Marlowe Lane. Just one light, halfway. Down the road, right by the overgrown lot where the Johnson house used to be before it, burned down back in '89. Nobody built there again. Too many bad memories. The grass grows wild and tall, the trees twist in unnatural ways, and every time the wind blows through that lot, it sounds like whispering. But maybe that's just the way dry Texas wind moves through oak and barbed. Wire dot for as long as I can remember, the bulb in that street light has been off somehow. Not broken, just ... odd. Some nights it glows steady. Others, it buzzes and spits light like it's struggling to hold on. And if you stood long enough on Marlowe, if you were brave or stupid or drunk, you'd see it. Something walks beneath. That streetlight around the same time every night, just after 2 a.m., when the rest of the town's curled up and dead quiet. Not a dog barking, not a tire on the road. Still and waiting. I first heard about it from my cousin Brady. He used to smoke out behind the church with a couple of the town's rougher kids, the kind that carved pentagrams into school desks and claimed they'd seen ghosts in the old slaughterhouse. Brady didn't scare easy, but I'll never forget the way he looked when he told me about it. Pale, quiet, eyes focused on something far off, like he was remembering something his mind didn't want to touch. It was tall, he said, but not like basketball tall, like ... wrong tall. And it didn't walk right, like its legs bent the wrong way, but it still moved like it knew where it was going. I thought it was a trick of the light, but then the bulb flickered like it always does when it's close. And what happened? I asked, already half scared. It stopped and looked right at me. I couldn't see its face, maybe it didn't have one, but I felt it. Like it crawled inside my head and just sat there. And then ... the light went out. Just snapped off. Total black. When it came back on, it was gone. I didn't believe him, not really. But I didn't walk down Marlowe Lane after dark either. Not until last week. I'd been working late at the garage, trying to finish up Mrs. Hafford's busted Buick. By the time I got done and cleaned up, it was past 2. My truck wouldn't start, dead battery. The irony wasn't lost on me. I could have called someone, but I live on the north end of town and figured I could walk it easy. I took the long way to avoid Marlowe, always did. But the wind picked up, thick with dust and heat, and something in it changed my mind. I can't explain it, just this heavy pressure behind my eyes, a weird pull like gravity had shifted ... so I turned toward Marlowe. The street was empty. No breeze, no bugs, no rustle of leaves, just silence and that faint hum from the overhead lights, all of them steady. Except the one. Halfway down the road, the street light flickered. Twice. Like a warning. I told myself it was a loose bulb, a faulty circuit. Something explainable. I kept walking. With every step, that light got closer and the shadows stretched longer. I could hear my boots crunch on the gravel, but there was something else layered under it, a soft rhythm. Not footsteps exactly. More like dragging. Something heavy, being pulled across the pavement. But I didn't see anything ahead of me, until I did. It stepped out of the lot where the Johnson house used to be. Tall. Too tall. Its head brushed the streetlight wire. Its arms hung low, too long for a person, and its fingers, God, its fingers, nearly scraped the ground. It moved slow, deliberate, like it wasn't in a hurry but knew I wouldn't leave. The bulb buzzed and flickered. My heart jumped. I froze. It turned its head toward me, or at least I think it did. The shape of it was all wrong, like a coat hanger wrapped in skin. And where a face should have been, there was nothing but shifting blackness, like looking into a tunnel you knew didn't end. I stepped back. just 1 foot. That's all it took. The light above us hissed and shut off. Darkness swallowed the street. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't see it anymore, but I felt it. It was near. Too near. Close enough that the air around me went ice cold and the scent of burnt plastic filled my nose. My ears rang. My mouth tasted like pennies. And then ... a whisper ... just one word, stretched and low like it came from a throat filled with water. Stay. I ran. I don't remember how I got home. Just that I slammed the door, locked it, and didn't sleep. My hands shook. My clothes smelled like ozone. And when I finally gathered the courage to look outside through the blinds, Marlowe Lane was empty. Again, except for the streetlight. The one that never quite worked. It was on, glowing steady. I tried to forget. I told myself it was a dream, that stress and exhaustion got the better of me. But then I saw the news the next morning. A teenage girl, last seen walking home from her boyfriend's house, disappeared near Marlowe Lane. Her phone was found in the weeds by the old Johnson lot. The screen cracked, battery full, playing a voice memo that no one could explain. Static. And beneath the static, a voice just barely audible. Stay. The next night, I drove out to the lot. I don't know why. Maybe guilt. Maybe curiosity. The cops had taped it off, but nobody was there now. Just me and the light. Flickering again. I stood under it. Waited. Nothing happened. Then I looked down and saw it. A long black mark across the pavement, like something had been dragged. It led into the lot. I followed. The air changed again, heavy and cold. My breath came in clouds even though it was July, and there in the brush, half hidden by dead branches, was a hole in the ground. I hadn't noticed it before. It looked old, too perfect, like it had been dug, then covered, then dug again. Something moved inside it, just a shuffle. Then silence. I didn't stay. I called the police anonymously, told them to check the old Johnson lot again. They didn't find anything. No hole, no drag marks. Just the busted remnants of an old swing set and broken glass. But that light, that same street light, it's been off every night since. Not flickering. Just off. And I swear to you, if you stand there long enough, close enough, and quiet enough, you'll see it too. The way it waits, the way it watches, and when it moves, the darkness follows like it belongs to it. Last night, I saw it again, from my bedroom window. I live 3 blocks away, but I saw the glow just for a second, and then the lights in my hallway went out. It was supposed to be just another quiet evening. Jacob and Dana had taken the long way home, the road that curved behind Miller's Pond and wrapped through that sleepy row of post oak trees where the old gas station once stood. The sky had gone soft and lavender, the kind of Texas dusk that made everything shimmer slightly like the world hadn't quite settled yet between day and night. Dana was humming something under her breath, a habit she had when she felt content, and Jacob had one hand on the wheel, the other resting gently on her thigh. They had lived on Briar Patch Lane for 3 years now. Third house from the end, a one-story limestone ranch with pale green shutters and a sagging mailbox that Jacob always said he'd fix. Nothing special about it, but it was home. So when the gravel crunched under their tires and the porch light came into view, there should have been comfort, familiarity. Instead, Jacob slowed the car to a full stop halfway down their driveway. Wide? You stop? Dana asked, leaning forward. Jacob said nothing. He was staring at the front porch. Dana followed his gaze, and that's when the chills settled in her chest, because there were 2 people standing on their front steps. Not strangers. Them. Same hair, same clothes. Dana's blue cardigan that she'd been wearing all day. Jacob's faded Astros cap tilted back on his head. The other Dana stood with her arms crossed exactly like she was doing now. The other Jacob raised a hand and waved just as he had earlier to their neighbor, Mrs. Levinson. Then both doubles turned slowly and stepped inside the house. Jacob's voice was low. "You saw that, right?" Dana nodded once, stiffly. "They look just like us." Jacob backed the car down the drive, engine still running. The tires bumped off the gravel onto the dirt shoulder, and he killed the headlights. They sat in silence. The house in front of them looked perfectly normal again. The porch was empty. The lights in the living room flicked on. Then the kitchen light. One after the other, like they were moving from room to room. "I'm not going in there." Dana whispered. Jacob didn't answer. He kept staring, watching, waiting. Finally, he reached into the glove box and pulled out the small flashlight he kept for emergencies. "Stay here." Dana grabbed his arm. "Jacob, what if it's, I don't know, them still in there? What if it's some kind of trick?" But Jacob had already stepped out. The door shut quietly. The flashlight beam wavered as he crossed the yard, passing beneath the same porch light that moments ago had lit up their duplicates. Dana watched through the windshield, hands clenched so tight on her thighs her nails dug into skin. Jacob didn't even make it to the front steps. He stopped dead. Dana could see why. The door was ajar. Jacob bent and picked something up off the doormat. He brought it back to the car, his face pale. "It's my key," he said. "The one I lost last week. Remember? Thought I dropped it at work." Dana took it in trembling fingers. It was scratched, like it had been used recently. "Okay," she said, voice shaking. "What if someone's messing with us? Like a break-in, but they dressed up like us? Stole our clothes?" Jacob didn't answer. His eyes drifted back to the house. "Look at the living room window." Dana turned. The curtain shifted. Someone was watching them from inside. She felt her skin go tight, cold, like it didn't fit right anymore. "Call the police." Jacob was already pulling out his phone. No signal. He held it up.
"Stepped a few feet away from the car. Nothing. Use mine,"
Dana said. But hers showed the same: no bars, no service, not even the emergency call option. Then the porch light flicked off and the house went completely dark. Jacob looked at her. "We're leaving, now." He threw the car in reverse and peeled backward, tires spitting gravel. Dana didn't look back. She didn't want to see the curtain shift again, or that door swing open. They didn't stop until they hit the gas station 10 miles up the highway. The lights were flickering inside, but it was open. Jacob used the payphone and called the sheriff's office. When the deputy arrived at their house 30 minutes later, nothing was out of place. No open door. No footprints on the porch. No strange figures seen in the windows. Everything was locked. Their clothes? Untouched. Their home exactly as they had left it that morning. Probably just some kids pulling a prank, the deputy muttered. "We'll send a patrol car by tonight. Keep an eye on things. Y'all tried to get some sleep." But Dana didn't sleep. Neither did Jacob. They kept the lights on, the curtains drawn, the front door bolted. The next day, Dana insisted they install cameras. They set up one by the by the porch, one inside facing the living room. The third night after the incident, around 3:12 a.m., the alert on Jacob's phone buzzed. Motion detected. They both sat up. He opened the feed. It was dark on the porch, just barely visible under the floodlight glow. And there they were again. Jacob and Dana. Not them, but them. Standing on the steps, wearing the same pajamas they had on right now, staring straight into the camera. And then the image glitched. Just for a moment. When it came back, the doubles were standing closer. Right at the door. No movement. Just a single frame jump. Another glitch. Now they were inside, The camera in the living room caught it Jacob's double walking across the rug, hand brushing the same bookshelf that held his grandfather's old watch. Donna's double stared at the couch for a long time before sitting down on it. No sound, just their own faces, moving through their own house, calm and slow like they belonged. The feed cut out. When they checked the house the next morning, nothing was missing. Nothing moved, but the camera was fried. The rug had 2 sets of muddy footprints. And on the coffee table was Jacob's grandfather's watch. But it was ticking. It hadn't worked in years. Jacob stopped going to work after that. Dana took her laptop and moved their home office setup to her sister's place in Austin. They only came back during the day, always together. Never at night. Then, 2 weeks later, a new notification popped up on Dana's phone. Motion detected. At the same time, her sister screamed from the hallway, "Dana, come here. Look at the mirror." They ran into the guest bedroom. There was a full-length mirror on the closet door. It had been clean when they arrived, but now, on the glass, written in something that looked like condensation but wasn't fading, were the words, "We're already inside," and just before it vanished, Dana swore she saw her reflection smile, but she hadn't moved. The night the swing set started moving, the sky over Cedar Hollow was a thick, humid black, the kind of suffocating darkness that pressed against the windows like a damp rag. Jim McCarty woke first. The sound came faint at first, almost mistaken for something natural. Maybe tree branches swaying in the wind, maybe the screech of a loose gutter in need of a wrench. But Cedar Hollow had no wind that night. The air outside their 1-story brick home was dead still. Even the crickets had gone quiet. Jim lay in bed beside his wife, Erin, staring up at the ceiling fan turning lazily above them. The noise didn't stop. It had rhythm to it. Not mechanical, organic, like something being pulled back and forth. Something old, something that hadn't been touched in years, and now was being forced into motion again. Squeak. Pause. Squeak. Pause. He sat up. Slowly. The sheet sliding off his chest, sweat clinging to his back like a second skin. Erin stirred when the mattress shifted. "What's wrong?" she mumbled, her voice thick with sleep. "Do you hear that?" Jim whispered, holding up a hand like silence was fragile and might shatter. She listened, then frowned. "Sounds like chains?" Jim didn't answer. He got up, pulled on the jeans draped over the chair by the closet, and walked barefoot through the hallway to the back door. He didn't turn on the lights. Something about it felt wrong already. Not dangerous, not yet. But wrong, like walking into a room and forgetting why you came. The back door had a window that looked out onto the yard, a flat patch of grass, fenced on 3 sides, ending in a row of dense cedar trees that hadn't been trimmed in years. That yard had never held anything besides grass, weeds, and the occasional sprinkler. No toys, no trampoline, no swing set, but now, nestled near the far fence where the cedar trees hunched low, there it stood. A swing set. Old, metal, the kind you'd see in grainy black and white photos from the 60s, with peeling red paint and thick chains dangling from a rusted top beam. It was moving. Just one swing, gently gliding back and forth, the chain groaning on each arc like it hated being woken. The other swing hung still. Jim blinked and opened the door slowly, the creak of the hinge oddly loud in the silence. The air smelled like earth, turned-up soil, and wet iron. He stepped onto the porch, careful not to make noise, and stared harder at the swing set, hoping to see strings or wind or maybe even a prankster neighbor. But there was nothing. Just that single swing, moving like it was being used by something unseen. He didn't go further. Not yet. Just watched. By the time Erin joined him, the swing had stopped. "You see it too?" she whispered, clutching the blanket around her. Do, he said. We've never had one. No, she said slowly. And I'd remember if it was there yesterday. They stared at it together in silence for a long time. And then they went back inside, locking the door behind them. Like that thin pane of glass would matter if whatever made the swing move decided to come closer. By morning, it was still there. Jim walked out in daylight to inspect it. He figured. Maybe someone dumped it there. Dragged it into their yard as a joke. But there were no drag marks. No tire tracks. No footprints even. Just that old, rusted set standing crooked in the grass. The weeds around the poles were undisturbed. It was. As if it had always been there. He touched the cold chain and regretted it. His fingers came back dusty orange, like dried blood. He checked the bolts and supports. Everything was tight, solid, like it hadn't moved in years. But it had moved. He'd seen it. Aaron had too. That night, the swing moved again. This time, they didn't wait in bed. Jim had left his boots by the back door. He slipped them on and stepped out before the creaking even settled into its rhythm. The moon was just enough to see by. Aaron followed, flashlight in hand, but the beam barely pierced the thick dark. Still, they could both see it. One swing, back and forth. Back and forth. And this time, there was sound. Breathing. Not heavy. Not panting. Soft. Gentle. Like a child rocking slowly, humming without melody, and breathing through their nose. Jim whispered, "Do you hear? She?" Aaron gripped his arm hard. Her nails dug in through his shirt. He didn't flinch. The hairs on his neck stood straight up. Then the swing stopped, not gradually. It jerked to a halt like someone had slammed their feet down. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. A beat, two, and then the flashlight flickered in Aaron's hand, not died. Flickered. Just enough for a glimpse of something on the swing, not a child. Not anything that should have been shaped like a child. Thin, long-limbed, bent the wrong way. Its face was obscured in the dark, but Jim swore it was smiling. Wide. Too wide. Aaron gasped and dropped the flashlight. It rolled in the grass, casting broken shadows that seemed to reach. When they looked back up, the swing was empty. By morning, it was gone. Not just the thing. The entire swing set. Not a pole left behind. Not an indent in the dirt. Not a single mark in the grass. Jim walked the whole fence line, checking for where someone could have removed it. Nothing. They even considered calling the sheriff, but what would they say? A ghost swing visited our yard and brought something with it. Days passed. Then a week. Nothing returned. The nights were quiet again, too quiet. Like the yard was holding its breath. Then one morning, Aaron opened the back door to let the dog out. The dog stopped at the porch and started, whining. The swing set was back, exactly where it had been. But this time, both swings were moving, back and forth, together. Perfect unison. Jim was at work. Aaron stood frozen in the doorway, barefoot in her robe. She watched the swings for a full minute before her gaze drifted down. Under the left swing, the grass was flattened into small circles the size of tiny feet. Dozens of them, but under the right swing, no footprints. Just a deep groove in the dirt, like something long and heavy had been dragging in circles. That night, they didn't sleep. Not because of the swing, because of the knocking. At the back door. Just after midnight, 3 knocks. Then silence. Jim stood in the hallway, holding the shotgun he kept in the closet but hadn't touched since his father died. Aaron clutched the cordless phone in both hands but didn't call anyone. Who would come? Another knock. Slower. Heavier. They crept toward the kitchen, staying low. The window in the back door had gone foggy, like someone was breathing on the other. Side. Jim reached out with shaking fingers and wiped a circle in the glass, and stared straight into a pale, Hairless face. It didn't blink, didn't flinch, just leaned in, its skin touching the glass like it wanted to come through. Jim stumbled back, dropped the shotgun. Aaron screamed. The face vanished. They ran to the living room, locked every window, every door, sat with the lights on until dawn. By morning, the back door was wide open. The swing set? Gone again, but this time the ground under it wasn't just grass. It was dug up, like something had been buried there. Or worse, UNBURIED. They moved 3 days later, packed what they could, left the rest. Didn't look back. The new owners lasted 4 nights. Neighbors say the swing set showed up again after their second day. By the 5th day, the house was empty. No for sale sign this time. Just a padlock and a single rusty chain draped across the porch railing. It started the second week after we moved into the old single-story ranch house on the edge of Waller County, Texas. It sat low and wide on 5 acres of pine-bordered land, the kind of place that looked peaceful in the daytime. Too peaceful? Maybe, like it was trying a little too hard to convince you it was just a house. It had long windows along every wall, windows that somehow felt closer to the floor than they should be, as if they'd been installed to let something in that crawled instead of walked out the first night it happened. I thought it was wind. There'd been a dry thunderstorm passing over, all heat, lightning, and distant rumbles. And around midnight I heard a tapping noise from the back of the house. Just a couple of taps, soft but deliberate, like someone gently testing the glass in the laundry room. I sat up in bed, holding my breath, and didn't hear anything else after that. No wind, no footsteps. Just the creaking groan of the old wood settling, which it did a lot. The house felt like it breathed sometimes. The next night, it came again. This time it started with the same 2 taps at the laundry room window. Then 10 seconds later, 2 taps at the kitchen window. I froze. The windows weren't close together. Someone or something was moving along the back of the house in order, going room to room. When the tapping came to the living room, I turned off the lamp and sat there in the dark, listening. After each pair of taps came a silence so complete. It pressed on my ears, tap, tap, then nothing. It didn't stop at the living room. I heard it move past the study, then my son's bedroom, then mine. By the time it tapped at our bedroom window, I was sitting up in bed with the blanket clutched in my fists, staring at the wall like an idiot. The noise was too precise to be random. It was in order, always in the same order. Laundry, kitchen, living, study, kids' room, then ours. Then silence. It never skipped a window. Never tapped twice in the same spot. Never faster or slower. Always a steady 10 seconds between each. The timing was too perfect for an animal and too strange for a person. And the scariest thing was it never made any other sound. No leaves crunching, no footsteps, no shadows moving outside. Just those soft, skin-on-glass taps, like someone gently rapping with their fingertips. After the 3rd night, I told my wife. She laughed it off at first. Stress, she said, or maybe a woodpecker. But that night she stayed up with me. We kept the lights off and sat on the living room floor, backs to the wall, waiting. Around 12:13 a.m., it began again. Tap, tap, laundry room. She squeezed my arm so tight I thought her nails might break skin. Tap, tap, kitchen. Her breathing got shallow. I could hear it over the silence between the taps. Tap, tap, living room. We sat there in the dark and listened as whatever it was came closer, room by room, window by window, making its silent, orderly patrol. It hit the study, then the hallway. Window by our son's door. We got up and ran into his room, heart hammering in my chest, and scooped him out of bed just as the taps hit his window. By the time it came to ours, we were all in the closet. My wife's hand was over our son's mouth, and I held the baseball bat I hadn't swung since high school. We didn't speak. We barely breathed. And after the last tap hours, it all went silent. The next day, I walked the property. There were no footprints, no scuffs or disturbed leaves, just undisturbed pine needles and silence. I thought about cameras, but something about the idea of capturing it, whatever it was, felt wrong. Like filming, it might give it permission. To do more than tap. Night 4, it skipped the laundry room. That was new. It started with the kitchen, then the living room, then the study. The pattern had changed. My wife was already awake, sitting bolt upright in bed. We didn't move this. Time just waited. I knew where it would go next. Our son's window. We both held our breath, but it never came. Instead, the taps came straight to our room. Not light this time, not gentle. 3 hard knocks like fists, and then a sound I'll never forget. It was breathing, not panting, not gasping, just steady, low, patient breathing, close enough that I could hear the moisture in it. I lifted the blinds an inch. Nothing. No face, no figure, but there was something on the glass. A smudge, like an oily handprint, wide and long, just under the pane. It hadn't been there before. Didn't sleep the rest of the night. The following morning, our son said something strange. He was 5, sharp for his age, but still prone to saying odd things. He said, "The man was nice last night. He told me you'd be next." He didn't. Seemed scared, just confused. I asked him what man. He said the one outside his window, with the long fingers. We packed a bag and stayed at my brother's for a few days. When we came back, nothing happened the first night. Second night, same. Third night, it started again. Tap, laundry room. We hadn't even unpacked yet. My wife cried. I stood at the window with the bat, ready to swing. I don't know what I expected to hit, but the rage helped drown out the fear. It moved through the house like always, and each time it tapped. I could feel it inside my chest, like it was testing something deeper than just the windows. Like it was looking for a way in, not just into the house, but into us. I boarded the windows the next day. Every single one. Plywood, screws, even nailed the frame shut. That night, it didn't tap. It knocked. Hard. Not on the windows this time. On the walls, from the inside. We don't live there anymore. We left the boards up, told the realtor not to open them. Said it was termite protection. The house is still on the market. Been there a while now, but sometimes I check the listing, and every once in a while I see a new photo of the interior, taken by some fresh-eyed real estate photographer who doesn't know better. And in every set of photos, without fail, there's always one picture of a window somewhere in the house with a faint, greasy handprint on the inside. Always the same height. Always the same fingers. Always waiting. It started with a soft clink. That was the first thing Wade Harper noticed. Not the cold wind brushing through the scrub trees, not the distant coyotes yipping past the north fence line, but the sound of metal nudging metal, too gentle for a break-in, too steady for a freak gust. It was coming from the front gate, the main one, the one that had no business moving after sundown. Wade had owned that stretch of Texas hill country for nearly 30 years. 180 acres just outside of Mason, fenced and cross-fenced, a 2-story limestone ranch house, 3 barns, and a lot of dead quiet. He liked it that way. After Marla passed and his boys left for the oil fields, he didn't want company, didn't want trouble, didn't want change. He just wanted the gate to stay shut. It was the kind with thick vertical bars and a heavy latch you could hear echo if it dropped wrong. Built solid. He remembered bolting it himself during ceilings. The last drought, welding the hinges till they turned black. It creaked when it moved. Old iron does that, and on a dry night you could hear it from the porch swing. That first night, Wade told himself it must have been the wind. Except there was no wind. At 2:17 a.m., the gate opened. He watched it from. The front window should have been asleep, but something had stirred him. Maybe the dogs, though Bo and Chester were quiet in the corner. Maybe the air had turned heavy. Maybe it was that damn clink again. He stood there barefoot in his flannel shirt and saw the gate swing slowly inward just a couple of feet. Then, stopped. It never swung back. Wade went out in the morning, grumbling about rust or maybe the latch slipping loose. But there was no rust. The hinges were greased. The latch was firm. Still, he shut the gate and jammed a thick wooden board through the middle bars, blocking it from either side. A temporary fix, he figured, until he could find the real problem. Next night, 2:17 a.m. The board was on the ground. The gate was open, same distance, same angle. Wade stood there again at the window, half tempted to grab the Winchester from the wall. He didn't, just watched. He didn't sleep well. Something about the way it never closed again. Not even in the wind that kicked up later. Day 3. He chained it. Heavy logging chain. 3 loops around the post. Padlock rusted shut from the barn shelf. Key long lost. If something wanted through, it'd need bolt cutters. But that night, the gate opened again. At exactly 2:17. He checked his phone clock, set it to tick loud beside him. He watched the chain go taut, groan, then drop, not snap drop. Like someone had twisted it the right way, undone it clean, and laid it aside. The gate opened smooth. 2 feet. No more. Wade didn't bother trying to shut it anymore. He just left it. But it didn't budge farther. It never swung wider, never moved during the day, and when morning came, it was always open. Never closed. By the end of the week, he welded the latch shut. Spent 3 hours in the heat, mask down, torch spitting sparks until the steel glowed red and sealed tight. He cooled it with the hose, kicked it hard, nodded to himself. Fixed. But when he checked the clock again that night, and the numbers blinked over to 2:17, he knew it had happened before he even looked. The gate was open. Wade went down with a flashlight. That night, alone, the dogs wouldn't come past the porch. Not Bo, who barked at everything. Not even Chester, who once chased a wild hog into a thicket. They stood there low to the ground, tails down, ears back, like the dirt itself warned them off. He stepped through the open gate with the flashlight in his hand and nothing in his heart but the itch of curiosity. That old dangerous itch that men like him learned to ignore but sometimes forgot. Nothing was on the other side. No footprints, no tracks, no sound. But the air felt thick. The kind of thick that made you taste copper in your teeth and feel the damp press of something old. Something you weren't supposed to know about. Wade waited until dawn. Sat in a lawn chair by the gate and stared at it until the sun came up. It never closed. Not even with him watching. He called a local welder the next day. Told him to rip the whole damn gate off and replace it with barbed wire. The man came, stood there staring at it, and scratched his beard. "You sure, Wade? Gate's fine. Looks brand new." Wade didn't answer. He just nodded and told him to start cutting. Welder fired up the torch. Got maybe 10 seconds in before the gas line sputtered and the flame died. He shook it, relit. Same thing. The welder said it must be a clog, maybe water in the line. He went back to his truck for a second tank. It didn't matter. The gate was open again that night. Wade started keeping logs. Dates, times, photos. He bought one of those wildlife cameras, motion sensor, night vision. Set it on the post facing the road. That night he watched the gate open. Next morning he checked the camera. It was gone. Not just broken. Gone. The straps were still there. Hanging limp, but the camera was missing. No footage. No trace. Something was coming through. He tried setting traps next. Steel bear traps, the kind you hide with leaves and hope don't snap your own leg. Dug 3 into the dirt just inside the gate, but they never triggered. He found them all the next day dug up, cleaned off, and placed neatly in a row beside the mailbox. Wade didn't know what scared him more, the thing coming through the gate, or the thing being polite about it. It got worse when the noises started. Not just the clink, but whispers. Long, low, wordless murmurs from the dirt road beyond. Sometimes laughter, sometimes crying, sometimes something between. It never echoed, never traveled. It just hovered in the dark. He stopped going outside. After sunset, kept the shotgun loaded, locked every door, even though nothing ever came close. It always stopped at the gate, just beyond it, just inside it, somewhere between his land and the rest of the world. He tried sleeping in the truck one night, parked right by the gate with the engine running. At 2:17 a.m., the battery died, not drained, just stopped. Lights off, radio cut, clock blinked out, and the gate opened. Wade didn't remember driving back, only the faint memory of footsteps around the truck, not heavy ones. Barefoot. The next day he found a small, perfectly round stone sitting on the hood, black, smooth, cold to the touch. He threw it into the creek. It was back on the porch the next morning. The thing that finally broke him wasn't the gate opening. It was the call from his eldest, Sam. Said he'd had a dream about the ranch. Said he saw something tall walking up the road. Not human, not animal, just a shape, walking past the gate. Sam lived in Odessa 4 hours away. Wade never told him about the gate. The next night, at 2:17 a.m., Wade sat on the porch with the Winchester across his lap and a bottle of whiskey in his hand. He didn't plan on drinking it. Just figured if it was coming, he'd rather face it with something familiar. The gate opened, but this time, something walked through. He didn't fire. Couldn't. His arms froze, his breath went thin. He watched a long figure glide between the posts. No feet, no shadow. Just the suggestion of limbs and a pale, stretched head that turned toward him without features. It didn't move fast. It didn't need to. The air got heavy, and the dogs whimpered behind the screen door. Wade shut his eyes. When he opened them, it was gone, but the gate was still open. It's still open today. He never fixed it again, never tried. Grass grows over the latch, dust gathers on the posts, and every night at 2:17, the wind changes direction. Something waits just outside the edge of light. Something watches, and the gate never shuts. They first noticed him in April, right after the last cold snap of the season. Late enough in the year that folks in Fairgrove were already pulling weeds and oiling their porch swings. Early enough that the air still had that faint bite in the mornings. The first report came from an elderly widow named Grace Cantrell, who lived on the corner of Vine and 3rd, right across from the water tower. She said he was standing in her neighbor's yard. Just standing. Tall as a scarecrow, still as a post. Wide-brimmed black hat pulled low, long coat hanging off his bony frame like it was soaked in rainwater. He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't blink. Grace swore she watched him for almost 20 minutes before calling the sheriff, and by the time anyone showed up, he was gone. People thought she was just confused. Grace had fallen once in the fall, hit her head bad enough to forget her cat's name. But then the Bartlett kids saw him too. Around dusk, behind the fence in their backyard, near the line of old mesquite trees that separated the neighborhood from the dry gulch where kids weren't allowed to play. He didn't move when they called to him. Didn't respond when their dog barked and barked. Just stood there, watching the house. Watching them. By the second week, nearly a dozen people had seen him. Always between the hours of 5 and 7 in the evening. Always in a different yard. He never came close. He never knocked. Never said a word, but he was always there, near enough to see. Distant enough to deny. It got so the kids on bikes wouldn't ride past 5th Street anymore. One little girl refused to sleep without the curtains closed and something heavy against her window. It wasn't just the hat or the coat or the unnatural stillness, it was his eyes. Or rather, what he didn't do with them. Not once did he blink. Not even when a breeze came through and lifted the brim of his hat, revealing a face too pale, too smooth, too quiet. Sheriff Duggan knocked on doors, drove loops around the blocks, even pulled in help from the next county, but they never caught him. A few grainy phone pictures surfaced, but they always looked like something out of a shadow, like the lens itself was too afraid to capture him right. One photo from behind a screen door showed the black silhouette at the edge of a yard. Another, taken from a second-floor bedroom, showed him standing in front of a fence, so still you'd think he'd been carved there. Blurry. Wrong. The images made your skin crawl in the way. Old dolls or mannequins do when they look too real. My name is Adam Calhoun. I moved to Fairgrove 6 years ago to get away from Houston after my wife died. Bought a quiet house on a quiet road just past the old VFW hall. I didn't believe in ghost stories. I didn't even believe in God much anymore. But that man, I saw him. I stood in my living room one Monday evening, the windows still open from the warm afternoon, when I saw him from the corner of my eye. He was standing in my yard. Not on the sidewalk, not near the mailbox. No, he was 10 feet from my porch, under the pecan tree I'd planted the year I moved in. His coat didn't move, his eyes didn't twitch. His mouth, if he had one, didn't shift. I stood there behind the sheer curtain and just stared at him, willing myself to blink, to look away, to move. But I couldn't, and neither could he. I thought about calling someone, but who? Duggan would show up and he'd be gone. Like always. So I stood there for what felt like an hour. And then, just as slow and strange as a dream, he turned. Not with his feet. His body didn't rotate right. It was like something pretending to be human. I swear to you, his head turned last, as if it didn't want to stop looking at me. And then he walked toward the road. I didn't move until well after dark. After that, things got worse. People began reporting strange sounds at night, knocks on back doors, the sound of boots crunching through gravel, a deep, slow breathing outside bedroom windows. And every time someone worked up the nerve to peek through their blinds, he was gone. But they felt it. Like something had just ducked out of sight. Like something enormous had just crept away. One boy, Tyler McKenzie, age 13, went missing in early May. His bike was found tipped over on the corner of Elm and Jackson, wheels still spinning. No witnesses. No suspects. No answers. Then, a woman named Delia Bell, who lived alone, was found in her kitchen, staring out her window with her mouth open and her eyes bone dry. She'd clawed her own face, left gouges down her cheeks and neck like something out of a feral nightmare. When the EMTs got her to snap out of it, she just kept saying, "He was right there." He watched me all night. I started sleeping with a hammer beside my bed. Some folks installed cameras, motion lights, even full-blown alarms. None of it mattered. The cameras glitched. The lights didn't trigger. The alarms never went off. But we all knew he was still coming. I sat in town. All the night they held the emergency meeting. People shouted, argued, blamed each other. Some wanted to form a patrol. Others wanted to bring in the state police. Pastor Redden said it was a test from God, that we'd let sin fester too long in Fairgrove, and this was the price. Duggan just looked tired, like the whole thing was pressing down on his shoulders. "We don't have a suspect," he said finally. We don't even have a crime we can prove. But I'll be damned if I haven't seen him too. The room went quiet. Someone asked where. He said, outside my daughter's room. Just last night. The old man never moved fast. He never broke his pattern. He would stand, he would watch, and then he would leave. Until the night of the storm. That night, a heavy lightning storm blew through town. Trees down. Power lines split. Everything dark. The kind of storm that wipes out cell towers and makes dogs hide in bathtubs. I lost power around 11 p.m. and lit candles. I was sitting in the living room when I heard a sound I'll never forget. 3 knocks. Not on the door, on the window. The one just 3 feet from where I sat. I didn't move. I barely breathed. And then I saw him. Standing not in the yard, but on my porch. Closed now. Closer than ever before. The candlelight flickered, but I swear to you, I could see his face. Smooth. Pale. Too smooth. No lines, no pores. Not a man's face. A mask, almost. And behind those wide, watching eyes there was nothing. Not rage, not hunger, not sadness. Just emptiness. Like looking into a hole in the world. He lifted his hand. Not fast, not violent. Just slow, deliberate. And he tapped the window. 1, 2, 3. Then he turned and walked off the porch and into the rain. That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, the sightings have stopped. No one has seen the man in the hat since that storm. No new reports, no fresh photos, but Fairgrove hasn't relaxed. Not really. You can feel it in the way people look out their windows now, in the way the wind feels colder even in the heat of July. In the way my neighbor's baby wakes up crying every night at 2:14 sharp, and in the way no birds ever land in the tree outside my window anymore. I think he left something behind. Or maybe he's still here, waiting, watching, just not outside. Not anymore. Every night around 2 in the morning, the neighborhood along Parker Lane in Abilene would come alive with the sound of howling. It didn't matter the breed, size, or temperament. Every dog from the Dobermans in the gated ranch-style house, on the corner to the yippy little terrier behind the fence across the cul-de-sac, would begin to howl at once, like a chorus that needed no conductor. They didn't bark. They didn't growl. Just long, low, mournful howls that rose and fell, like ghostly sirens in the still Texas dark. And always, they all faced the same direction, toward a bare, blackened patch of asphalt about a third of the way down the street. At first, no one really said anything. People chalked it up to coyotes in the distance, or maybe a cat in heat that none of them ever actually saw. But when the dogs only howled at that one spot and nothing else, night after night, and only at the exact same time, 2:03 a.m., it started to crawl under the skin of the folks who lived there. That specific, that consistent, that unnatural. It had started around the beginning of spring, March 9th. That was when old Mr. Carson first noticed it. He was retired, ex-Army, lived alone since his wife passed. The kind of man who knew the time by the birdsong and didn't believe in ghostly nonsense. But even he couldn't ignore it. The first few nights, he'd gone out on his porch with a flashlight, cussing at the mutts and yelling for folks to shut their dogs up. Then he saw they weren't barking randomly. They were all sitting or standing stiff as poles, heads tilted back, mouths parted in that eerie dog wail, and every last one of them staring straight at that patch in the road where the pavement looked different than the rest. Blacker, shinier, as if it had been burnt smooth. Carson remembered what happened there. Everybody did. About 12 years ago, a man had been hit by a car in that very spot, hit and dragged. The driver never stopped, and they never found who did it. The victim's name was Isaac Bell, lived 2 streets over in a rented trailer, and walked this stretch of road every night after his shift at the meatpacking plant. Tall guy, quiet, kept to himself. Not unfriendly, just distant. The kind of man people said hi to, but nobody really knew. Then one night, he just didn't make it home. They found what was left of him just past the streetlight, twisted, and split open in ways that didn't look real. One of his boots was down in the drainage ditch, the laces still tied. The stain never quite came out of the road. The city repaved it the week after, but no matter how many layers they put down, that spot stayed dark, as if it had soaked something up, something more than just blood. The neighbors tried not to talk about it. Over time, new people moved in. Kids grew up, and the memory faded into a whisper. Until the dogs started up. And then weird things started happening. Mary Gutierrez, who lived directly across from the patch, started leaving her porch light on all night. Said she saw someone standing out there, not moving, not walking, just standing in the road around 2 in the morning. But when her husband got up to check, the street was empty. Not a sound. Not even a breeze. The Simmons boy, Kyle, 17 and dumb with curiosity, decided to go stand on the spot one night. Thought it'd be funny. He made it about 3 feet from the edge of it before he dropped to his knees and puked in the gutter. Said it felt like something heavy pushed down on his chest. Said he heard something whisper his name, not out loud, but inside his ears, like it was crawling around behind his eyes. He didn't sleep for 3 days after that. His parents took him to a doctor, gave him pills. Didn't help, word got around. Parents told their kids to stay off the road at night. People started pulling their blinds shut early. Porch lights stayed off after midnight, but the dogs kept howling. Every single night. One night, Carson stayed up past 2. Sat on his porch with his shotgun across his lap and the thermos of coffee. He didn't believe in ghosts, but he believed in patterns. And something about this was wrong. The way the wind went still. The way the air changed, thicker somehow. Like the atmosphere turned syrupy and hard to breathe. He watched the dogs all rise one by one from every yard on the street, like they were answering a call only they could hear. They turned, slow and stiff, toward the spot. And then came the howl. Low, deep, sad. Carson swore he saw the heat shimmer around that patch of road. Like the summer sun was baking it, only it was near freezing that night. And then, just for a second, he saw a shape, standing right there in the center of the spot. Not a man, exactly, but the outline of one. Tall, lean, the air behind it bent, like glass warped in a fire. The shape turned toward him. Carson blinked, and it was gone. Just the dogs, still howling, and the road, still black. That's when he started marking it down. Every night, 2:03 a.m. The dogs. The cold, the shape, for weeks. He showed his notes. To the pastor, to the sheriff. Nobody listened. They humored him with nods and soft voices and told him to get some rest. Then the dreams came. Several neighbors, different houses, different people, started reporting nightmares. All of them had the same feel, standing on the road, unable to move, staring at something that was crawling toward them from under the black patch. Not running, not walking, crawling, like bones bending wrong, skin dragging behind. One woman dreamed she saw her own face staring up from the pavement, smiling with no lips. Another man dreamed he was buried underneath it, screaming, and no one could hear him. When they started talking, they realized it always started at exactly 2:03 a.m. That's when things really fell apart. Pets went missing. 2 cats, a retriever, a parrot, even from the Stanton's house, just gone. No fur, no feathers, no blood. Then the Martinez girl, Emily, went sleepwalking one night. Her parents found the front door wide open. She was halfway down the street, barefoot in the cold, walking toward the black patch. Her eyes were open, but blank. Her mouth was moving like she was whispering something. Her dad ran and grabbed her, dragged her back, but he swore. He felt something pull back, like the air itself was holding on to her. The town finally sent someone to repave again. This time they dug deeper, tore up the whole section of road and laid new gravel, new asphalt. Brand new, shiny, smooth. For 2 nights, the dogs were silent. On the 3rd night, the howling started again. Only this time it was worse, louder, more desperate. They didn't just howl. They screamed, guttural, panicked. And this time, not all of them faced the spot. Some of them stared at their own front doors, at their owners. At nothing at all. Carson called the sheriff, told him someone needed to come down, that it wasn't over. The sheriff came, saw nothing, left. That night, his cruiser was found empty 2 blocks away, driver's side door open, radio still crackling. No sign of him. Dogs howled louder that night than ever before. And the patch returned, right there in the middle of the brand new pavement, as dark and smooth as it ever was. Like nothing had been done at all. Now people move out, one by one. Houses go up for sale. Nobody buys them. Carson is the last one left on his side of the Texans street. He says he doesn't sleep anymore, just watches, takes notes, drinks coffee, talks to himself, says he's not afraid, just waiting. Waiting for what? Nobody asks anymore. But if you drive down Parker Lane around 2 a.m., roll your windows down and listen, you'll hear them. The dogs. You'll see the dark patch in the road, untouched by time or weather. And maybe, just maybe, if you stop and look long enough, you'll see it too. The shape, standing, watching, waiting for someone else to step too close. The howling always starts the same dot and it never ends. It started just after they moved into the house on the edge of Lake Belton. Not right away, not like in the movies where the weirdness kicks in before the boxes are even unpacked. No, this waited. It gave them time to settle, to feel safe, to think maybe they'd found a little piece of quiet out in the woods. The house sat low and long, all dark stone and cedar beams tucked behind a curtain of post oaks and juniper. It had a wide porch and a sloping backyard that rolled right down to the lake's muddy shore. From the back windows you could see the water glitter through the trees. From the front, just trees and gravel and sky. Lena and Tom had left Dallas to get away from the noise, the layoffs, the shrinking savings, the miscarriage. They said it without saying it, both of them. They needed air. They needed space. So they bought this place in the hill country with what was left of their money and a small inheritance from Tom's grandmother, who'd always said you couldn't grow anything worthwhile if you never stopped moving. Lena thought about that sometimes while she unpacked plates or folded sheets. The way she'd said it, like a warning more than advice. The first scratches appeared on the 3rd night. Thin, almost delicate little lines etched into the wood frame of the dining room window. Tom noticed them while smoking on the porch and came in scratching his head. Could be squirrels, he said. Or a raccoon. Maybe a bobcat. Scrub country's full of them. But the lines weren't high like a bobcat's reach. They were low, right around the base. Like something on all fours had paced the edge of the house, close, deliberate. It didn't alarm Lena at first. Just one of those things. Country life. They even laughed about it over breakfast. But by the end of the week, the scratches had grown deeper. Not just around the dining room, but the back door, the bedroom window, even the little crawl space accessed by the water heater. Some gouges went through the stain into raw wood, like something strong had dragged claws or nails along every seam. They tried setting up a trail cam, one of those motion-detecting wildlife ones Tom used to use on hunting trips. It caught nothing, not even bugs. The screen stayed blank, even though the scratching came every night now, always starting just. After 2 a.m., they would lie in bed, both awake, breathing slow and quiet like children trying to avoid a monster. The sound was faint at first, like someone running a fingernail along the outside siding. Then it got sharper, deeper, more impatient. It would circle the house, pausing now and then under their window. Tom got up once and yanked the curtains. Open flashlight in hand, nothing. Just the dark and the quiet. Like the world outside had shut itself off. Lena stopped sleeping through the night. She took to dozing during the day, curtains drawn, curled up on the couch like she was hiding from something. Tom stayed up late in the den with a bat across his lap, watching the windows. They didn't say it, but something felt wrong with the house. Not haunted, not exactly. Just wrong. Like the place itself didn't want them there. Like something was testing the walls. Checking for weakness. And then came the whispering. It didn't start loud. You wouldn't even call it whispering at first. Just a hum or a hush, like wind moving. Through pine. But there weren't any pines nearby, and the trees outside never moved when it started. It didn't come from inside the house either. That was the part Lena couldn't explain to the sheriff when she finally called him, red-eyed and shivering. "It's outside," she'd said. "It's just outside." The voice, if that's what it was, came from behind the walls. Like something pressing its mouth to the house and speaking in a voice too dry to be human. No words at first, just sound. Like breath mixed with gravel. Then, one night, Lena swore it said her name, soft, real soft. Not loud enough to wake you, if you were sleeping. Just loud enough to let you know it was real. Tom didn't believe her at first. He thought maybe the stress, the move, the long empty days had gotten to her. Until the night he heard it too. They were sitting in the living room, both awake, the clock just shy of 3 a.m. The sound began near the back door, a scratch, light and fast, followed by silence. Then came the whisper, drifting from the edge of the window frame like smoke. "Tommy." They moved to a motel that night without talking. Just packed 2 bags and drove into Temple, where the lights stayed on and the walls didn't breathe. They planned to list the house. Get out. Cut their losses, but something followed them. The third night in the motel, they woke to scratches on the room door. Not at the knob, not like a person, at the bottom. Something low to the ground. The next night, the scratches were on the window frame. When the manager came to inspect, he found the paint stripped in small, tight circles, like a dog had spun in place while clawing at the wall. They moved motels. Then again. By the end of the month, they'd gone through 5 different rooms across 3 towns. The scratches came no matter where they stayed. The voice too. Always from outside. Always faint, like someone mouthing words just beyond the reach of hearing. They stopped calling the police. There was nothing to report. No trespasser. No signs of forced entry. Just damage and dread. And nights that didn't end properly. Tom started drinking. Quietly, at first, then more openly. He stopped shaving. Then he stopped leaving the room. He sat at the foot of the bed and watched the door like it was going to dissolve. Lena did what she could, called her sister in Lubbock, tried to find a place to go. But the whisper came there too, over the phone. It cut through the static and said her name. After that, the calls stopped. They tried sleeping during the day and staying up all night. The whisper found them anyway. They moved back to the house. Figured if they were going to be hunted, they may as well stop running. Something about being back there almost felt better, familiar, like the fear was easier to manage in its original shape. The scratching resumed. Its circuit, door, window, crawl space, like it never stopped. The voice returned too. And then, one night, it answered a question Lena didn't remember asking. "What do you want?" She whispered, forehead pressed to the cold wall. Answer came soft and slow. "You know?" That was the last night Tom spoke. He sat up in bed the next morning, eyes open but distant, like something inside him had shut off. Lena couldn't get him to blink, couldn't get him to speak. He followed her when she moved but never looked her in the eye. Just stared at the walls, at the windows, at the space just beyond them. The whisper never came inside. It didn't have to. It scratched and scraped and whispered and waited. It wasn't trying to break in. It was wearing them down. Like water over stone, like time. Lena started marking the days on the wall with chalk. She ran out of room by the second week. She used the back of the pantry door, then the fridge, then the bathroom mirror. No one came to check on them. No one. Passed by. No deliveries, no mail. It was like the rest of the world had agreed to forget they existed. She wondered if maybe they never should have come to the house. If it had always been waiting for someone, not to haunt, but to trap, to become. A skin they couldn't shed. On the last day, or what Lena believed was the last day, she stood, barefoot in the hallway and listened. The voice had stopped whispering. The scratches had stopped. But the silence was worse. It was heavy, alive. She walked to the front door and placed her hand on the knob. She didn't turn it. Just waited. Outside, something moved. Not quickly. Not with urgency. Just movement, like shifting weight. Like whatever had circled their house, motel, and lives was finally standing still, waiting for her to open the door. She turned her head, called to Tom. He didn't answer. He never would again. The first time I noticed the lights flicker, I chalked it up to the old wiring. The house was built in the late 60s, somewhere between harvest season and the Kennedy assassination, and it still had that lingering smell of cedar and varnish. Under the drywall. I just moved in after my divorce, looking for a quiet corner of East Texas where I could drink my coffee in peace and not feel like the world was watching me crumble. The place was cheap, way too cheap for the square footage, but the realtor gave me that soft, sympathetic smile and said something vague about needing work. I thought I could handle it. Thought maybe being alone out here 30 miles from Tyler and surrounded by pine might be good for me. Might clear out the noise in my head. The living room was my favorite spot. Big bay window up front. 2 leather recliners that had come with the house. They looked untouched, which should have been a red flag, but I was too tired to care. First night I set my coffee mug on the armrest and turned on the lamp by the window. Soft yellow glow filled the room like a warm blanket. Then the lights dimmed. Not a buzz or a flicker like you'd expect from a dying bulb. This was a slow pulse, like the house was breathing, like something had passed by and dragged the light with it. I looked outside, squinting into the dark yard. Nothing. Not a rabbit, not a leaf moving. But the shadows on the wall, something was off. I couldn't explain it then, not exactly. Just a weird shift in the shape. The shadow from the recliner was longer than it should have been, almost like there was someone sitting in it when I knew it was empty. I turned around, and the chair was right where I left it, still untouched, still facing the window. That became the pattern. Every night, right around 9, the lights would pulse once, then twice, then settle. And every time they did, I saw that same shape shift, something that didn't match the furniture. The shadows were wrong, angled, jagged, taller than me. Sometimes they moved when I didn't. I tested it one night, waved my hand real slow, and watched its shadow rise before mine did. I didn't sleep that night. I asked around the town what little there was of it when I made my first run to the feed store for supplies. The woman behind the counter, Miss Annis, was maybe 75 and wore a silver cross over her apron, like it was armor. When I mentioned the address, her smile cracked, said I must be braver than I looked. I asked what she meant, and she just gave this little shrug like it wasn't her business and handed me my receipt. People around here didn't like talking about the past, I'd find out. Especially when the past had a habit of returning in the dark dot. By week 3, things got worse. I started noticing the lights flickering even during the day, barely perceptible. But there, a little skip in the brightness like a cloud passed over the sun, only the sky was clear. One morning I went to take out the trash and found footprints in the dew. Bare feet, long toes. Not barefoot like a kid running through sprinklers. No, these were too long, too thin. Like the prints were stretched. They led right up to the front steps, then vanished. I measured them against my own, and they were a good 5 inches longer. Too deep for a raccoon or stray dog. I didn't own a pet. And the gate was locked. The nights got colder, even though it was early summer. I'd sit in that recliner trying to read or watch TV, but always glancing toward that window, always waiting for the lights to dim. When they did, the air went still. The crickets outside stopped. The fan over my head slowed. Then that creeping. Dread would slide down my back like a wet towel. I didn't want to look, but I always did. The shadows got bolder. I'd see them stretch across the wall like something was moving inside with me. Not fast, just pacing. Slow, careful steps. The shape looked tall, slender. No detail, just that dark impression like smoke in the corner of your eye. One night I called my buddy Randy, former cop, lives up in Gilmer. I told him what I'd been seeing, half laughing like I wasn't serious. He said it was probably just nerves and too much isolation. Said I should come up for a beer and watch the game. I did. The lights didn't flicker that night. But when I came back, the chair was turned toward the hallway, like someone had been watching the rest of the house while I was gone. I tried everything. Called an electrician, he checked the wiring, said it was old but solid. No flickering while he was there. Got a priest out too, even though I'm not the praying type. He walked the place, said a few words, sprinkled some water. Then he looked at the front window and just stood there, silent. I asked what was wrong, and he just shook his head and said some things don't leave easy. That night, the lights didn't flicker. They shut off completely. The moment I sat in the chair, it was like someone flipped a switch. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. Then came the sound, soft at first, like fingers brushing the outside of the glass. Not knocking, not scratching dash, just ... touching, dragging. Then came the thud. A slow, steady thump against the siding, moving along the house. Kitchen to living room. Living room to hallway, like something was circling. I stood up, grabbed the flashlight, pointed it outside. Nothing. But the light bounced off the window and I saw it just for a split second. A reflection that wasn't mine. Taller, narrower. Its head tilted like it was studying me. I didn't sleep again for 3 days. Couldn't. I started hearing things, little whispers in the vents. The words didn't make sense, but the tone chilled me. Urgent, pleading, angry. I caught myself talking back once. Asked it what it wanted. The lights flared, then went dead. Again, I left that night. Slept in my truck off a service road near Henderson. When I came back in the morning, all the lights in the house were on. Even the ones I never used. And the shadows on the wall? They looked like a crowd now. Dozens of them. Standing still, watching. I boarded up the windows, every last one. Covered the mirrors. Took down the pictures. Nothing helped. The thing still came. Still passed by the front of the house every night like it was checking in. And every time it did, the lights would flicker, then dim, then pulse like a heartbeat. My heartbeat, like it knew me. Like it wanted me. Last week, I set up a camera. Put it in the corner of the living room facing the window. Just to prove I wasn't crazy. Watched the footage the next morning. Saw the lights dim around 9:06, then 9:09, then again at 9:13. No movement on screen. But the shadows, God help me, the shadows twitched. Not moved, twitched, like they were reacting to something I couldn't see. At 9:16, a shape slid past the window. Just a blur, but it paused, leaned in, pressed its hand to the glass. The print stayed. I ran to the window, and it was there. 5 long fingers. Thin palm, no smudges, no oil. Just frost. I don't sit in the living room anymore. I sleep in the hallway, under the attic crawl. The front window is sealed shut. Still, the lights flicker. Every night without fail. Still, the shadows dance across the wall like they're waiting. And sometimes, just before I fall asleep, I hear it. The thing. It doesn't knock, doesn't scratch. It walks, right up to the front steps. Right up. To the glass. And the lights dim, one bulb at a time, and the shadows shift. And something breathes right behind the wall. The worst part? I think it's getting in. I think whatever was out there is inside now. The flickering starts sooner. The shadows don't wait for nightfall anymore. And I've started seeing it not fully, not clearly, but enough. In the hallway mirror, in the TV screen when it's off. A tall, thin blur that doesn't match my shape. It stands behind me. It waits. Every time I close my eyes, I tried leaving. Yesterday, packed a bag, got in the truck, drove 15 miles before the engine died. No reason, no warning, just stopped, and when I looked in the rearview mirror, the house was there. Closer than it should have been. Like I'd never left. I'm writing this in the attic now. Flashlights dying. I can hear the lights flickering downstairs. One by one, I can hear the floor creak. Not from settling. From steps, slow, measured. Coming toward the ladder. I don't know what it wants, but I know it's close. And this time, the lights aren't flickering. They're out. It was just past 6 in the morning when David Martin stepped outside to fetch the newspaper, same as he had every day for the past 22 years since he and Julia bought the house on County Road 106 outside Gainesville, Texas. The screen. Doors slapped gently shut behind him, and the cicadas had already started up in the trees across the gravel drive. The summer heat wasn't quite up yet, and for a brief second, David relished the stillness, the kind of quiet that only rural Texas mornings could offer. He scratched his head, still a bit foggy, and turned back toward the house. That's when he saw it, a second front door, right there, bolted shut, set into the siding just to the right of the real front door. Same color, same design, same black brass knob and old-fashioned keyhole. Same cracked step leading up to it, same flaking white. Paint on the porch trim. It was like someone had copy-pasted the entryway while he slept. David froze. His first thought was that maybe he'd lost his mind. He reached up and rubbed at his eyes with both fists like a child. Opened them. Still there. He stepped back, trying to make sense of what he was looking at. The thing was, the door didn't look new. It wasn't freshly installed. The wood around it wasn't cut or patched. It looked like it had always been there, weathered in the same way. Even the dirt along the baseboard was scuffed, like feet had worn it down. But he knew it. Hadn't been there yesterday. He'd painted the porch trim himself 2 months ago. he would have seen a second damn door. He didn't go back inside right away. Instead, he stood there for a long time, watching it like it might blink or vanish. Finally, he walked up to it slowly. The doorknob was ice cold, colder than it should have been for a July morning. He tried to turn it, locked. He leaned in close, heart thudding louder now than it had any right to, and knocked out. It made a sound hollow, dull, but not empty, like there was space behind it. But no footsteps, no voices, no movement. He knocked again. Nothing. David stepped back and looked at the other door. His real front door. It was just as it always had been. Nothing strange about it. He opened it and called in. "Jules?" She appeared in the hallway, holding her coffee. "You forget the paper again? Come out here. Just come look at this." She gave him the sort of look wives save for moments when their husbands are acting weirder than usual, but she came. She stepped onto the porch and blinked at the sight beside her. "What the hell is that? You tell me." "That wasn't here yesterday." "I know." They stood there, shoulder to shoulder, watching it like it might move or start breathing. Julia reached for the knob and yanked it once, then again harder. "Don't," David said. She looked at him. "Why not?" "I don't know. Just don't." By noon, the kids had seen it too, Ben and his younger sister Emily. Neither remembered ever seeing it before. Emily, who was 12 and still had that half-trusting belief in fairy tales and haunted houses, refused to go near it. Ben, who was 17 and full of teenage invincibility, knocked and then dared it to open. It didn't. David tried calling the sheriff, but it felt stupid the moment he started dialing. "Hey, Sheriff, I woke up to a new front door that's bolted. Shut and probably shouldn't exist." He hung up before the call connected. That night, neither he nor Julia could sleep. She kept tossing, pulling at the sheets, muttering in her half-sleep. Around 3 in the morning, David got up and walked downstairs. The porch light cast long shadows across the front yard. He peeked through the curtain. The door was still there. But something had changed. The bolt, he could see it clearly now, was drawn back. He opened the front door slowly, the real one, and stepped outside in bare feet. He padded across the porch, hardly breathing. The knob on the second door looked darker, wet almost, and there were scratches beneath it, like someone or something had been trying to get in. Or maybe out. He reached for the knob again, cold as ever. He thought he heard something from the other side, a creak, like shifting wood, like weight moving on old floorboards. His heart punched at his ribs. Then silence. He backed away. Didn't try it. Didn't want to know. By morning, the bolt was drawn again. They tried to ignore it, but it changed things in the house. The air felt wrong. He kept finding Julia staring at it from the window. She started keeping the curtains closed. Emily refused to sleep upstairs and moved her sleeping bag into the hallway. Ben started staying at friends' houses. The second door never opened, never moved. But they could hear things sometimes. Soft shuffling behind it. Breathing. Once, David thought he heard whispering his own name, low and drawn out like it was coming from underwater. He stopped sleeping, started drinking. Julia asked him if he thought they should leave and go where. He said, "What do you tell people? Our house grew a new door and it's giving us the creeps?" One night in late August, the sounds got louder. Thumping. Slow at first, then fast, angry. The whole house shook with it. It stopped as soon as David grabbed his shotgun and aimed it at the door. The moment he did, silence fell again. Like whatever was behind it didn't want to be seen. The scratches beneath the doorknob got deeper after that. Long grooves, splinters. Julia left with the kids the next morning. She didn't call it running away, but that's what it was. David stayed. He told her he had to understand it. Something was wrong with that house, and he wasn't going to let it beat him. He set up a chair in the living room facing the second door, kept the shotgun on his lap. For a while it was quiet. Then, the day before September began, it opened. He didn't see it open. Just heard the creak, slow and dry like old hinges coming alive. He froze, didn't even breathe. The door swung. Open maybe 3 inches. Not enough to see in. Just enough to let in the smell. Rot, damp earth, old cloth. Something else, sour and wrong and unnatural. He stood. Walked slowly across the living room, eyes locked on that sliver of darkness. He reached out with one hand and pushed the door. Gently opened. It was a hallway. Narrow, impossibly long. It shouldn't have fit behind the front of the house. The geometry was wrong. The floor was wood, but the boards didn't match the ones in his house. They were gray, warped, old. The walls were papered in yellowing stripes curling at the corners. And at the far end of that hallway was another door, closed, painted the same color as the outside of his own house. He didn't go in. He closed the door and bolted it again. But it opened every night after that, just a few inches, always waiting, like it was patient, like it knew sooner or later curiosity or madness would drag him through. And then, one morning, a third front door appeared. On the other side. Also bolted shut. Also identical. David laughed when he saw it. Laughed until tears came. Then he sat down between the 2 doors and waited. They've been opening on their own since. Then, he hasn't seen Julia or the kids in weeks. He doesn't leave the house anymore. Neighbors say they hear talking sometimes from the porch. Not yelling. Just calm conversation, but only one voice. Sometimes they see shadows moving behind the second or third door. Sometimes the shadows match David's shape. Sometimes they don't, but no one knocks. And no one answers when they do. She first heard it around 1 am. I sound too soft for the dogs to notice, but just sharp enough to pull Alan out of sleep like a fishhook snagging something deep. It was a whimper, or maybe a muffled cry, coming from outside. The kind of sound you could mistake for a cat if you wanted to, if you needed to, just to get back to sleep. But Alan couldn't. His daughter, Emma, had been sick all week, stomach bug or something worse, and between the constant upchucking and high-pitched, restless dreams, sleep had been rare for the whole house, but tonight was different. She was finally quiet, finally down. His wife Dana had passed out next to her, one arm slung protectively across the girl's middle. That quiet, that stillness, it should have been peaceful. So when he heard the sound outside again, and when it came in short little pulses like someone was trying not to cry too loud, it made his skin go cold. The old farmhouse sat just off a cracked county road west of Canton, Texas. Alan's parents left it to him years ago, and they'd patched it up over time, replacing the loose porch boards, painting the siding, even shoring up the crawl space under the house that was always too low and too dark. But the porch remained a thing of its own, long, creaking, and shaded by the tin overhang that pinged like a typewriter in the rain. The crying was coming from that porch. He stepped out of bed slowly, careful not to wake Dana, and grabbed the flashlight from the knit stand. The sound came again, low and shaking now, like whoever or whatever was crying was growing more desperate. Still soft. Still just on the edge of belief. He moved quietly through the kitchen, past the hanging bunch of keys and the framed pictures of a younger, less tired family. He pressed his hand against the front door before unlocking it, pausing, listening. There was wind, but not strong enough to explain the sound. The trees swayed slowly in the moonlight. Crickets ticked away in the weeds. Everything else was still. He stepped outside. The flashlight beam cut across the porch, catching the far rocking chair that hadn't been used in years. It shifted slightly in the breeze, then stilled. The floorboards moaned under his weight. "Hello?" He called out softly. The crying stopped. Alan moved forward, sweeping the flashlight across the railing, into the yard, over to the hedges, down the stone walkway to the fence. Nothing. Just emptiness and low fog hanging in the field. The scent of dirt and dew filled his nose. He exhaled hard and rubbed his eyes. Maybe he imagined it. Maybe it had come from further away, a night animal herd or some other child across the stretch of pasture. He turned around, meaning to head back in, when the light flicked down past the edge of the porch and caught something he hadn't noticed before. Something. Glinting. Eyes. Down low. Under the porch. Alan froze. The flashlight beam trembled in his grip, the lens shaking over those two pale glimmers staring back at him. Wide. Human, but not blinking. He crouched slowly, not wanting to make sudden movements. The boards groaned again, and he knelt just enough to angle the light under the porch's lip. That's when he saw her. She was lying on her side facing him, a girl. Hair matted and dirty, arms curled against her chest. Her knees were tucked, like she'd been shoved under there or crawled into that tight space to hide from something. Her face was thin, streaked with what looked like mud or blood. He couldn't tell in the beam light, but it was her eyes that pinned him in place. They were too big, too white, too still. "Hey," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "You. Okay? Are you hurt?" No answer, not even a flinch. He moved the light slightly and noticed her fingers twitch. Just barely. But the rest of her stayed still. "Sweetheart," he said again, lowering himself further, his knees pressing into the chivet. "Cold wood. You're safe now. I'm gonna help you, okay? I'm gonna get you out of there." But the girl didn't move. He looked back toward the door and thought about waking Dana, about calling someone. But it was the middle of the night, and they were miles from town. The phone was inside. The girl was here. He lay flat and reached out slowly, fingers stretching toward her hand. The dirt smelled sour under there, damp, earthy, but with something else too, something bitter, like rotting leaves and rust. "Come on," he whispered. The girl blinked. It was the slowest blink he'd ever seen. Like her body didn't quite know how to move anymore. Like it had to remember how. His fingers were inches from hers when she finally moved. Her head tilted ever so slightly. Her mouth twitched open. He heard something. Not a cry this time. A whisper. It didn't sound right. It didn't sound like a girl. He pulled back slightly. The whisper came again, raspy and low, too low for a child's voice. It said something like his name, but garbled, like someone underwater trying to talk. Through thick weeds, his spine stiffened. He yanked his hand back and scuttled to his feet, stumbling on the porch steps. The flashlight rolled and landed with a clatter on the bottom stair, its beam spinning across the grass. The whisper kept coming. He wasn't hearing it with his ears anymore. It was crawling into him from behind his eyes. He stood there, trembling, trying to tell himself to go back inside, to wake Dana, to call for help. But his feet wouldn't move. The light from the flashlight flickered, then steadied. The porch creaked behind him. Slow, heavy, like something was shifting. Underneath, he turned around just in time to see a hand snake. Out from the gap under the porch, palm down, fingers digging into the wood like it was soft soil. The skin was dark with grime, the nails broken and blackened. Then another hand. Then shoulders. The girl, if that's what she was, dragged herself. Out in a slow, unnatural crawl, her joints bending wrong, her movements jerky like something else was pulling the strings. Her head lolled to one side as she looked at him, and her mouth hung open. Alan backed away until he hit the edge of the stairs. He tried to scream, but his voice locked up. She stopped at the edge of the porch, half her body still in shadow, the other half catching the flashlight's beam. Her skin wasn't just dirty, it was mottled, stained with something dark, almost green. Her jaw moved, but the whisper came again without her lips forming the words. "Let me in." Alan stumbled inside and slammed the door, locked it, bolted it. He stood there in the dark, holding his breath, eyes fixed on the doorframe. No sound, no knock, no scream, just that whisper, fading into the seams of his mind like smoke through a crack. He didn't sleep the rest of the night. By morning, the porch was empty. No signs of disturbance, no marks in the dirt, no broken boards. Dana thought he'd had a nightmare. Emma just smiled weakly and asked for juice. But that night, the crying came again. Same time, same tone. And this time, when he shined the light. Under the porch, there were more eyes. Too many, too wide, too human, and not one of them blinked.